Okay, we're ready to get started. So Steve will just briefly mention our meeting this morning, which I think this is just kind of food for thought at this point. With Steve, Debbie, and I met with Brian, Justin from Newcastle EMS, and the mayor. They presented us some paperwork that came up with some new numbers. This is their preliminary number, but it is basically triple what we currently contract with the city of Newcastle at. So there's still a lot more to be discussed and a lot more to go through, but just knowing what we've got ahead of us and realizing that no matter where we settle here, I'm sure it's going to be more than the 300,000. So it's definitely going to have to be a big part of our discussions throughout the next several months and going into budget session.
Exact number or is it?
915,000.
Did they present you a substantial documentation to justify it?
They presented us with a budget, not actual expenditures. So we got into some questions about that. There was, so they presented us with a budget, a lot of which is contract numbers. They're also, I'm sure several saw that Zoll contract that was in the paper, and they're trying, that is included in this number. They are trying to get out of that, which could affect it. But basically, according to their numbers, 39% of their calls are county related, 61% are city related. Steve, jump in anytime.
I'm just trying to put my.
Put your button on. Yeah, so everybody can hear. But so basically there's 61% are city, 39% county breakdown. And their budget total in totality was 4.55 million basically. And out of that, the healthy community is the community paramedic. I can't remember.
Community paramedicine.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, that program, they backed that out because those are grants. Those are grants funded at 210,000. So that brings the net down to about 4.34.
Revenue from the county for that 39% was roughly 785,000, I think.
780,000. They're They still have, the city council still apparently has no appetite to balance bill, which I'm not quite sure I understand nor agree with. Kenan, I don't think your mic's on, bud.
No, it's not.
Okay. Maybe that was intentional. No, so I think we need to reach out to our counterparts in the city council and understand their thought pattern. I mean, I can only speak as someone who, Scott, you have years of experience in insurance. I have several years. If we go to the hospital, if we go to our doctor's office, we go to our dentist, our optometrist, or any of those in between, we expect to pay whatever the insurance doesn't pay, including the deductibles.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure why anyone shouldn't expect the same when they jump on an ambulance.
At the county level, when the county went to balance billing, that number that they generate is not huge at the county level, but on a $4.5 million or what, I know that's their budget. I don't know what their actual billing is. I'm assuming it's close. I don't know. It may not be $1 million, but it would be something.
They admitted that it would be impactful. They're trying to come up with a number. They said 50,000 plus.
Yes, 50,000.
I mean, so 50,000 is still 50,000. I mean, in our number.
I was gonna
So
say, Debbie, that when I said to you that I thought it was 30,000, it was 32 is what they had originally charged for the balance billing. But that wasn't what they got collected. So that was where that number came from. as far as
So
county.
I agree that it would not fix all problems, but I think it would have an impact.
Well, and that's why we went to build, every penny counts. So if you're getting $500 or $5,000, it's $500 or $5,000 more
Yeah.
than what you were getting.
So again, this is just kind of a catch up for the meeting that Debbie, Steve, and I had this morning. We don't have a lot of details beyond that. I mean, I think you three commissioners have got some serious decisions to consider and, kind of think about the options, the things that can be done. Steve mentioned potentially quoting other sources, just as a due diligence, which I think makes sense. But we've got to look at our options. And then the city did seem very willing to work with us in many ways. So they want to try to come up with a resolution. But obviously with these things that the state is doing, it impacts us greatly, but it also impacts the city greatly as well.
There's also some legislation that they're working on at the state level, and I have no idea, like Baker Tilly said, how that may affect us. But this is a problem statewide, so it may help. Getting back to every little bit helps. I wish they would go to balance billing, but how does the Henry County EMS, where are they at in their status to be able to assist with any of this, if any of this?
That would be more of I'd have to defer to Bobby. I mean, my understanding briefly, and you guys jump in at any point, is that they're making some very big headway in looking at the ALS, but they're still not necessarily fully capable to take the full 911 regimen of calls.
I would say they don't have paramedics on staff to do 911 dispatch, but they can do ALS transports, which they couldn't do before. So they are at that point now. So they're closer. I don't know how many years out. They
To
may
be fully staffed to be a
Yes.
911 service,
mean,
that's not on her radar right now. It's getting
Because nobody
this
saw
mic
this
is
coming.
high. It's getting to
You
where
really have to eat these small ones, I
I
found.
know. I do know they have been backing up the city when the city is slammed, taking 911 calls. Steve, I think what,
They did.
100, in 2024, they did 111
Yep,
And
111.
911 calls backing up the city when the city got slammed. But
They did one yesterday.
yeah,
Well, I asked a question in the meeting is because Newcastle used to supplement like South Henry and others for a paramedic service. I asked if that was a potential possibility. On the initial, Newcastle didn't seem to be that interested, but I think you have to have all options on the table because we're going to have a limited amount of money and a whole lot of people with their hand out. And we've got to figure out a way that if Bobby's neighbor dials 911 down there because they're having chest pains, we've got to get somebody out to them. And, we've got to have,
I
it's
live
going to be
close enough to Wayne County.
Okay. So Bobby's neighbors, forget Bobby.
No,
We're
I'm
going to have
kidding, I'm
Susan's
kidding.
neighbor, Debbie's
Newcastle,
neighbor.
look, Newcastle EMS was in the county. Yeah, Dublin's got a really good service. Newcastle EMS was in Strawn several times over the last 5 days. So they provide a good service. So.
Yeah,
That was a joke that I just got to Wayne County.
but we do need to, it's a big discussion and it's bigger than everybody in this room. So we all got to figure out a way to work together and try to make sure that the citizens of this county are covered.
What's the status of Southwest? I know they were trying to start something back up.
There's nothing there.
Middletown.
So
Middletown still operates.
Middletown to.
And Shirley.
Middletown and Shirley, they have a map here. I can show
I can't
you.
remember how many calls Middletown took.
800 calls for Middletown and 100 calls for the Shirley area is what they had.
And
Yeah.
I know in Middletown, depending upon the call, Chesterfield responds ALS depending. There's a couple of services up in that south, is that Delaware County?
Delaware,
Southwest
Madison.
Delaware or Southeast Madison,
Yeah.
that depending upon the call, and I don't know the specifics of the call, sometimes they will get dispatched out as well. Middletown is staffed, I believe, I won't say they're staffed 24/7.
I don't
But
think
they're
it's
staffed-
seven.
They're staffed pretty regularly.
So Middletown, what they do have that in here actually is, I can tell you, give me a sec. Middletown is 6 to 6, 6A to 6P.
Okay.
That's their normal staff.
That they have
Shirley is
staffed on
volunteer.
site, and then they respond from home.
It was the same.
Shirley's volunteer. So they are a volunteer. They don't have regular staffed hours.
Maybe we should be credited for each Henry County run when Newcastle is booked and we do a run, maybe of that 900,000, it
Well,
should
but
take about
we
250
generate the revenue.
Yeah, we do the billings for those.
We do the
so.
billing for
Oh.
it, so.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
maybe we need
I
more
like
of
it.
those.
I like the math, but I'm not sure it's right. So no, we all knew this, we were going to be facing this year. This is not a shocker to anybody in this room. So the number was about what I expected, but it's still real. And I told them, I was very honest. I said, we don't have $600,000. With the cuts we're looking at next year, the big changes we're looking at, we don't have $600,000. I was very honest with them that I said, there's nothing that we have short of making massive cuts that we could find that kind of money. And as Debbie said, we couldn't raise our taxes enough to accommodate for all the losses we're going to have this year. So it's,
Is the 915,000 just their incremental expense? It's not.
That's
so
their
basically
high-
they took their budget divided by the 39% minus the revenue.
We're
The
sharing their
708,
overhead too,
they're
though.
sharing and everything. So it's their total overall costs. The $780,000 in projected receivables from the runs for the county.
That's the money they took in running out in the county, so they took that off.
And I don't think they looked at run by run. I think they took that as a net number and divided it by the 39%. So there may have been more expensive runs here, less expensive runs there. I mean, I don't think that was a per run dollar figure. It was just their total revenue divided by the 39%, their total expenditures divided by the 39%.
Did they talk about, do they know how much their costs have been increasing per year? I mean, could we expect this to be going up
So
100,000 a year?
I
200,000?
did not mention this, but this is what they actually want. This is an annual budget, but they want it reviewable by quarter. They want us to actually come together every quarter and rediscuss the numbers
This way
because
goes
it
up
could go up
down.
or down. Of course, they kept saying down because that makes more sense, but for them, but they didn't. Yes, but and I told them I said, that's extremely difficult to budget for. In an annual budget, how do you budget for quarterly expenditures? And so, which they still seemed very adamant that they wanted to review this quarterly onto how much we paid.
That if we did yearly, they would take the year, if we didn't want to do it quarterly, they could do it yearly. And then if it was lower this year, then they would take that off of the amount we would pay next year. But that wasn't what they were wanting to do. They're wanting to do it.
And they didn't say they would raise it the next year, but I promise you that would be the plan. They didn't say that, but they did say lower, but
So are they looking at any of cost cutting measures to lower their costs?
well, they instituted several cost cutting measures already, according to them, including picking up an extra person that is an hourly rate and reducing their overtime rate by several $100,000 by doing that. It's saved because they're not having to pay as much overtime now. But they shut an ambulance down as part of this. They picked up the program as kind of a filler during their downtime. And then they do receive the $210,000 in grants from the hospital and other sources for that program.
What about equipment payments? Is it all included in this?
It's
number?
all included.
It's part of their budget.
Now, they did say if that $200,000 goes away, they are going to have to replace some of that. My understanding in the paper was they didn't use any of it, but I guess they do use some of that equipment. And so they would have to basically go back and spend about half of that to get what they actually need back. So it would say that if they were able to get out of that contract, it would save them about $100,000 was my understanding. Is that what you guys gathered?
Yeah.
So it's not. So, I mean, in that case, it would save us $39,000 off the 915.
What did they say when you said there's no way we can afford that? We don't care.
They didn't really. I just, there was some off the wall comments made by the mayor, of course. And, that was just, there's a few comments made and, not that they would ever be real, but
Their
yeah.
comment would be they can't afford to pay for county EMS service is their comment, I'm
yes,
sure.
he said he did what he basically said. Bottom line is if I need to cut my budget because of everything happening next week, I know where I can cut it by $900,000.
40%.
I know where I can cut 40% of the EMS budget. Now, if he does that, he does have to lay off a lot of city employees because he doesn't get $780,000 in revenue either.
But he was
So-
okay with that. He knew that.
Mhm.
He seemed, but yes, he didn't come out. He did say, I'm not threatening I'll do this, but this is what I can do, is how he put it.
But reading the article in the paper, Mr. Koger didn't have much sympathy for Brian coming yeah,
Justin Harrison. or
it was
Brian
Justin.
Clark.
He didn't have much sympathy for their increased in cost. I mean, we raised $450,000 in an EMS lit. And I didn't hear that they were at all have any appetite for increasing anything in their budget. Now, maybe they can't, given their scenario, but it seems like we're going to take the brunt of their shortages because we have to provide ALS service.
Well, according to them, they're dividing it out by that percentages.
Okay.
That's what they say. Again, we have their budget. We don't have actual expenditures. We don't
that's-
have an audit. We don't have,
Yeah. I mean, in all fairness, I don't object to us paying fair share. If we're using 39% of their service, that's one thing. I just want to make sure it's an accurate number that we're paying. But when that number comes up to that, it, like Chad said, well, we don't get it. We don't have it.
yeah, I don't object to paying our fair share either, and I want to get everybody covered, but
Mhm.
the bottom line is I don't know where we pay it from.
So Chad, are those the numbers?
Yes. They're
Can
the
I make a
plan.
copy?
Sure. Sure.
I'm assuming, would everybody like a copy?
Please.
So,
I don't think it would be bad for us to vet and look into that a little bit more and just not take it on face value.
If we got a quote from a private company, that is one way of getting a comparable cost.
I can guarantee you it's probably gonna cost way more than that.
I would say-
I think
That's
it
the
might.
reality of
I think it
Yeah.
might, but I think we also, I mean, if our service is already covering some of the 911 calls, what is the possibility of us just continuing to do that and then supplementing? They only took 33 criticals last year out of the thousands of calls, 4,000 plus calls they took last year. They transported
most of them-
33 critical.
Most are BLS.
Are you talking about Henry County EMS?
Yes, Henry County,
Okay, can
no,
you
no,
say
no,
it?
Newcastle,
say it all- say it all again.
Newcastle EMS transported 33 critical.
So the others could have been BLS.
So could we find another, if Newcastle wasn't, if Henry County could ramp up to where they could cover the BLS calls, could we find another service that is amenable to supplementing the ALS, whether that's Reed Hospital, whether that's Hancock
So I
Hospital,
don't
whether
know
it's,
anything about EMS, running an EMS service, but is that possible to do, or is it hard to determine?
that is the way
that why
Middletown
they
and
don't-
South Henry and others operated.
Those 33 critical services. Are they emergency runs or transfer?
Emergency runs.
Emergency runs.
Because Newcastle does not do,
Want an ambulance if you're in critical condition coming from Reed, pick you up?
No.
No,
I get it.
I want them coming from as close as possible.
7 minutes is what their runtime is.
So let me ask.
8, it was 8.
The 8.
Yeah.
Up to 8.
And I can tell you that when my daughter before we had emergency transfer, even on emergency transfer, when my daughter needed that service, they were 2.5 hours. And I could have had her there in 40 minutes to Reed Hospital.
So would it be possible to talk to the city about us handling the regular 911 emergency stuff? And we'd have to look into what that would take with Mandy and what that, as an alternative to a $915,000 payment, but contract with them when a critical care is needed? I mean, if we're only
Chad
talking
asked them about
33,
paramedics and
yeah.
they
Question
didn't.
is, you really don't know if you need one until you know you need one, I guess.
That's what I was getting at. How does that call get made, and is it hard to?
I think
Probably can't always make that call.
the
right?
EMT that shows up on scene, that's what used to happen with Middletown and Southwest Henry. If they felt it, or dispatch could do an assessment of the
I
situation.
recall years ago, when we were running the EMS unit out of the sheriff's office, that there were a certain category of calls that we automatically would send a paramedic on, whether or not we knew at the time it was needed, just because, for instance, a heart attack type call or, serious auto crash or something like that, they would automatically send a paramedic on. And I think there is if I recall right, there was kind of a standardized list that became a ALS call or a paramedic call rather than a BLS.
What was the question I was gonna ask? Does Mandy have ALS trained people currently or in the
Currently, yes.
process?
She has some, and she is training more.
Is the training
I-
the same though to do transport versus doing emergency runs?
Transport, ALS transport is different than doing a 911 response to,
Yeah.
because ALS through 911 is basically a paramedic. We do have one paramedic that our assistant director is a paramedic. And we have others that are trained, because now if you go on ALS, and I may be all wrong and how this all falls into place, but if you're on a heart monitor and stuff like that and have to be transported, they can do those things where before they could not. So in case you go into cardiac arrest, whatever, they're able to administer. But before on BLS, they couldn't do any of those things.
But if only 33, and it's like Shannon said, you don't know till you get there if you really need ALS, but if only 33 were genuinely ELS, and we can't afford $900,000, which this legislative session makes me think you're correct, it's going to be very difficult without taxing more somewhere, then we really need to investigate this ALS versus BLS and how Henry County what they can and cannot do versus what Newcastle's doing currently.
Well, based on what Jay said, we might not be able to get it down to the 33, but maybe we could still
Get it down.
reduce it significantly.
And I told them, I left, that I've said, when I said we don't have the 900,000, I said, we're going to have to think outside the box on this, guys, because we just don't. I mean, I agree, we need to find a way to work together. We need to find a way to support each other. But, we don't have that kind of funds to throw at it. And, our statutory obligation is to send someone there for the 911 call, a BLS transport. I don't agree that that's the right thing to do, but that is what our statutory state obligation is. I think if Bobby's neighbor, again, picking on her, is having a heart attack, I want to be able to send somebody that, that can take care of that more advanced life support scenario, or someone has a massive car accident or
So in those
whatever.
two scenarios, are there anyone at Henry County that could
you can
adequately address those heart attacks? And
there are private companies and other hospitals and things. We are a bit of a unicorn in Henry County because a lot of counties, their hospital services ran through the hospital system. And like Reed Hospital runs an entire ambulance system. Several hospitals actually run the ambulance service as part of their service, and then the cities and counties contract with them.
did something fall apart with Henry County Hospital that we can't, don't they go outside of county?
So Brian Ring was at the meeting. I was just there across the street, and the mayor asked him if he's ready to start his ambulance service, and it was kind of a funny conversation. But but no, I mean, I hate saying this, but this is just the way it's always been, and that's the way it is. I mean, forever the county ran their own, then the city ran their own. We contracted with the city now. I think certain people were in certain places that made decisions decades ago that have impact on us today. But we've reached a precipice where we don't have the funds to continue down the road we're going down, and we're going to have to get creative and find a plan B.
Well, and I think there needs to, this, right now, it's a short-term, we're looking for a short-term solution. There also has to be a long-term plan and a long-term solution. Because right now, we're over a barrel, and there has to be a long-term solution. I don't know what that looks like, but so last year when we were looking at with the hospital and I called several hospitals, and the majority of them either helped fund a service, contracted with a service to help, or provided their own service, ambulance service. I think there was just a couple that contracted with a local EMS service to provide, to help fund and provide a service. But the majority, I think I called 9. The majority of them have their own service and provide their own
So
service.
is it correct that Henry County contracts ambulance service for transport outside of Henry County entities?
I'm not sure they have a contract.
I don't know that they have a contract.
They call it first come, first.
Oh, is it?
I know that Henry County EMS is starting to do transports, ALS transports out of the hospital.
Okay.
If they haven't already done one, it's going to be starting here very
But,
soon.
So the reason that the city stopped doing transports for the hospital, according to Brian, is because it was not a cost center. They lost money because the hospital refused to contract and supplement and pay them. So so they refuse to transport for the hospital because, and I'm assuming it's still the same way, the hospital doesn't pay us either. And so they used to, years ago, they used to actually. The hospital, even, I remember they provided a vehicle for the paramedic and things when we had the full service.
So when are you
But
going to address
they-
that with Brian
that's-
Ring?
It's, again, I think there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of
is.
people that have to come to the table to come up with a viable solution. I totally agree with Bobby. We got to figure out how to make sure her neighbor gets a ride to the hospital today or tomorrow. But we've got a 2, 3, 5-year plan that's going to have to be looked at. Commissioners have got to come up with what they feel is the right process for us to do. Then we as the council have got to figure out if we can fund it. And it's going to be a very difficult situation for everybody because, it's going to hurt everybody. I mean, it's financially, these aren't, I don't think these are money-making ventures. And so
No,
it's.
we've been told at every conference we've been at for the last, that I've been at 4 years. This isn't a Henry County, Newcastle problem. This is a 92 county statewide breakdown. And the insurance companies aren't keeping up with what needs to be paid to these services to keep them afloat. So unless the state's going to step in and subsidize this, or the insurance companies are going to figure out that they're going to have to pay more in order to have these services, then everyone loses where we're at.
A high percentage of numbers, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but is Medicare, Medicaid, and you can't balance bill Medicare, Medicaid. They are going to pay you exactly what they say they're going to pay you, not a penny more. And it is at a very reduced rate. So when you're running a 911 service, you don't know. It's not like going to the dental office and they say, I got to get a pre-authorization. I can tell you what it's going to cost you. You don't know if you're picking up a Medicare, Medicaid patient or a self-pay patient or somebody who pays 100%. I mean, it's, all over the place.
Most of the counties, and apparently it's a big talk now because our emails have been going crazy with auditors. Most of the counties give tax dollars to the county ambulance service. And it's going to happen here because there's no way on earth our ambulance service is going to survive on what money they have. They don't bring that much in like we thought they would. So it's going to take tax dollars to continue to keep it going as an ALS service.
And that's my fear. There's no way we can pay Newcastle and Henry County too. We can't even pay Newcastle. And so that's what do we do then? Because you say that, but you don't know that. We could be staring down this barrel next year if they're wanting $900,000. You aren't gone in a year.
And
You ain't going nowhere. We're going to get a
thing
chain.
You've hit your 20 years, haven't you, Debbie? Okay.
This irony is these two services in our county actually work together really well and they complement each other because what one service isn't doing, the other one is. So they work really well together and
Was not the case.
it was not. No, it was not. It's, yes, and it's come a long way and they've done a miraculous job. And, I think the mayor might have been a little bit stunned when we told him that they were basically, our service right now is self-sustaining. The only thing they give is, you said the 150,000, yeah,
From the
that
lit.
money, and that's all we provide for them. So they sustain themselves past that. Whether that continues, I don't know, but that's kudos to them because that didn't happen until just, last few years. So it's, because I remember having this conversation at Middletown when I first took office that for lack of better terminology, the service was hemorrhaging money and it was bankrupt. So, we were making some very hard choices then to get it to where we even had a service because it was either try to fix what was broken the best we could, or there was no service at all.
So Debbie, what I think would be interesting is of those counties that are sending those emails in our size range, how much are they paying? Are they managing it themselves? Or are they contracting with a third party? And if it's that third party, is it a hospital? Is it a municipality or who they're contracting with? Or is it a private company? Yeah.
It's a real mixed bag around the state.
Yeah, I know it is, but from my understanding and talking to folks, and Bobby, you've called several too, and we kind of stand alone. I mean, Delaware County does service the entirety of Delaware County with their ambulance service. City of Muncie pays them a very large sum of money to do it. But the city of Muncie makes up nearly more than 2/3 of Delaware County. The hospital is, I think, part of that project too. So we are kind of standalone here in that we handle it all ourselves. And we're a bit unusual. And so that's maybe why we're getting into these financial messes that we're in, is because all our counterparts throughout the state don't have the funds to pay out millions of, if we paid this 915 and only we're over $1 million in ambulance service fees in a $14 million budget. That's a lot of money.
When we've gone around ICCA, we are an outlier, and the way we handle it is it's a hodgepodge all around the state. It's contract, third party, and county, city, but we're an outlier, probably the only one exactly like us in the way that we provide EMS services. And I'm not sure it's the best scenario we could be going with.
I think we've backed ourselves into a corner where we have very few options at this point.
We need to make sure we look at total cost too, because we did contribute to Henry County EMS some ARP money for vehicles. So when we start looking at money,
Yeah, but
maybe they're self-sustaining, but maybe not if we have to start replacing our own equipment. I mean, we get into the same issue.
Like right now, they're making the payments on the ones they have, so we haven't had to give them any money for the payments once they got into it. And the fact that everybody knows that I'm pretty tight when it comes to spending taxpayers' money. But I was willing to let the ARP money go to them because ambulances hadn't been replaced in forever. It's embarrassing when you're on a transport to Indianapolis and your ambulance is broke down on the side of the interstate and you have to send somebody else out to get the patient out of there to finish the transport. That's not a good look for us, and we were setting ourselves up for a nightmare and legalities. So in order to get them where we didn't have that, brand new ambulance can break down same as anything else, but we lessened that by replacing that fleet, or now they have a decent fleet of ambulances over there to run with.
And I guess if we're going to look at Henry County EMSs, that they got ARP money of what their truly cost is, then we need to look at everybody's budget that got ARP money, whether it's building inspector out of the general fund or all the vehicles that we purchased with ARP money. I don't think we should single out one unit that got ARP money to look at what their total budget was.
But we're talking about this department.
I
so this
understand,
is the one that's got this conversation.
but I think that it's,
I think
if we're, because ARP money is ARP money, if we're looking at that, then we need to look at everywhere because it's the entire budget, what we're looking at, shortfalls. So that's my personal opinion.
I think one-time expenditures should be looked at, but I think we have to put more decision into the daily bills because that's what's going to hit. I don't anticipate, they're not asking for more ambulances that I know of, Bobby.
The only
You
thing
guys
I've
are, I mean,
been told
that,
is they would like to get into a rotation now since they've upgraded, so they don't wind up in the boat they were before, which makes sense.
well, yeah, it does, but we need a lot of those rotations.
Yes.
Call Jeff, have him come over.
Well,
You know,
and also,
there's-
so once you purchase a new ambulance, let's say the one that they just purchased, let's say in 4 years, they don't have to purchase a brand new ambulance. They can do a remount,
Yeah,
which is cheaper than purchasing a brand new ambulance.
Basically, you're just buying a chassis and
Right.
take that box and set it on
And
there.
you can remount several times.
Yeah.
But I
before the
do-
Box is obsolete.
I do think that has to be built into the budget as a eventual replacement cost or remount cost or whatever cost. But again, I think
And-
we got today's problem
Right.
and we got 27's problem. And that's, I think the one-time purchase, not so much in today's problem, maybe 27's problem.
It's
But-
just that the one-time purchase reminds us that you have to build equipment
Yeah.
into a budget was.
Yeah, I agree. Cause there's, I mean, we just had the same thing. We
And
had
I-
a
Chad, I
department
would
head who
agree.
just came for a vehicle, spent double what the last time they purchased a vehicle and we pulled it right out of the general fund. A department, the surveyor's department needed a new vehicle and we just pulled that right out. I mean, that's stuff we don't budget for. And, you know, our general fund budget is heading down and it's going to continue to head down even more drastically now. So we're going to have to pay attention from all of those expenditures on those kind of one-time purchases because they're all impactful and we have a massive unfunded liability in the sick pay for the employees when they retire. Before I left, Ann had it like a $1.2 million. I assume it's come down a little bit because we've had some retirees in the past few years, but even $1 million of unfunded liability there that if we had to pay out everybody's sick pay over the next 5 years, that's a couple $100,000 a year. That will devastate our budget if we have massive cuts from the state, $1 million+ a year in revenue.
I think we're heading to a perfect storm. We had it good with ARP monies to be able to do things that had been kicked down the road for, I'd say, decades. We've got opioids money, which will not last, and it's very specific purpose. We've got a legislature that's going to make decisions that we know if the 0% as far as maximum levy next year, that's going to dramatically affect us. And so is ARP's no longer going to be an option pretty soon. Revenues are going to go down necessarily because it looks like some of those proposals that Jason was talking about and Paige was talking about are going to come to fruition. Next year is going to be really tough.
I thought this pie chart was pretty interesting.
That was
Of all of the funds we received, you know, $1.9 million in revenue last year was interest.
Mhm.
We will not have that come 27.
So
'Cause
did we
all
use
of
that
those ARPA
interest in the
funds-
budget for this year? When it was calculated, you used interest? in the-
Yes, they did.
For the raises, yes.
But the only
Yes.
thing we did was supplemental lit because it's going down.
It's, but interest is, and that interest, so we haven't even talked about that reduction
And that is-
on top of the state's reduction. But
We didn't
that
include it in the
1.9,
budget that
Deb,
last
if we went back 5-6 years, it was a couple $100,000, if I remember right, 200,000-300,000, maybe.
I want to say when I took office, when Bill and I took office, it wasn't even $20,000. It's come up from there.
Yeah, but I mean, when we had
But,
some,
yeah, it's gradually increased.
so, but I mean, we probably can maybe assume 1/10 of that number come 27. Maybe. Because they just did an interest rate drop a few days ago. On top of you guys, you three having to spend all of the money from the end of the next year. So that number is going to drop. So you add the 2+ million we're going to lose in those 3 years, plus the $1.6 million a year we're going to lose in interest. Hold on to your hats. That's a lot.
Yes.
You know, we're looking at $7-8 million over those 27, 28, 29 timeframe that we will not have to play with anymore. And then we're turning around and looking at $500,000 here, and who knows if you say the Henry County needs more money, what it needs there, and then insurance is going to go up, utilities are going to go up.
Yeah.
Cost of medical for inmates is going to go up. We know it is.
Our general liability went up 32,000, isn't that what I told you,
Yeah.
Steve?
Yep.
We just getting ready to pay the bill.
And that's before we get this latest massive claim that could cause us a whole different set of problems. I'm glad you guys work on insurance. Aren't you, Scott? We just have to figure out how to pay for it.
It is a perfect storm of all bad news.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, we can pay the bills today, but we're gonna have to be very mindful if we want to. Some of you guys will be gone in 2 years, so we, Steve and I'll still be here. Susan will be here. Joe, I think you're up. Debbie's dumping us and running away. Kennan's term is up. I mean, but it's good. You know, this year's going to be fine. Next year's going to be tight. 27 is going to be, we're gonna have to punch holes in the belt because we're going to have to tighten the belt so hard come 27, it's going to get rough. And I'm afraid we're going to be in that stint of a few years of that with the way the legislature is looking now. And I talked to Corey at the meeting over there, and he's hearing even more direct things that could have impact on us. So, but it has everyone concerned. I mean, you know, there were a lot of folk, there was an EDC meeting over there, and there were a lot of different folks in that meeting that, you know, a lot of business owners, a lot of the hospital was there and other folks, and we're all feeling impact from it. Non-for-profits.
I know I I was resistant to the degree of lits we passed last year. Knowing what I know now, it put us in a lot better position than a lot of counties. And it's going to take whatever belt tightening we have to do, which we know we're going to have to do now. It's going to be less. We may have to tighten up one belt loop instead of 2 or 3, but we are in a better position having done that. I wouldn't have dreamt that last July, but I think that was, in retrospect, that was a good move on our part.
Yeah. So I don't know where we go with the ambulance. I think the commissioners need to do their due diligence and kind of talk amongst themselves and come up with what they think is a reasonable solution. Maybe look at what others do and, you know, see if there is a negotiating tool with the city or sit down. But, I mean, Kenan,
There won't-
Shannon, you guys have a much better, you're the two OGs of this group here from last year's budget. Susan, I guess, you know, I don't know that there's 600,000. You guys over budgeted the budget. All right. There's not $600,000 anywhere in the budget. I mean, and
I think it depends on, we added into the budget a lot of extra insurance deductible funds that we may or may not need this year, depending on how the timing of lawsuits. So there might be
Yeah,
something, but it's not 600,000. I also we all know that we will not find a solution for the same price we're paying now. So we should go ahead and work from that assumption. There will need to be additional funding. We will not find a $500,000 solution to this problem.
Did Brian Ring seem open to discussion on the hospital helping at all?
Which is very frustrating.
no. They have a lot of their own problems. They have a lot of their own problems, and they have their own set of issues that the state's making changes on them as well. So
Correct, but I've been on the hospital foundation board for the past 12 years. I'm off now. I think Brian needs to sit down and have a big discussion.
well, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have come in a meeting like we had this morning with all of us and the mayor and you know, Brian and Justin from the EMS and, you know, just, I think it's going to take a lot of very open and honest dialogue with everybody who has a stake and try to find the least painful solution for everybody.
So,
At some point, if, whether you have one service, two service, working, because one basically is taking care of people who come in and out of the hospital that they're moving back and forth, which is what we're doing right now. You have the other services taking basically your emergency, you know, critical stuff across the county. If either of those systems right now fail, what are they gonna do? See,
that's what I was gonna ask. What's the motivation of hospitals to contribute? Is it because we're bringing them customers, or are they serving the community?
Henry County drove 4,341 people to Henry County EMS last year.
So they're benefiting financially.
4,331 people times an average, it's millions, probably tens of millions of billables. That's probably that's just making, again, I'm trying to use business logic here, Scott, sorry.
I mean, you don't
We
want to
know how
talk
that works in
about
government, but
patients
this
that
is
way, but
business.
Yet
This is business, so I think
Well, they're in the business of making money off of.
so
sick people,
they're
so-
taking 4,300 plus folks to Henry County Hospital
So if
that
you
have.
figure, I mean, on a low of $1,000, which we know it's not,
Yeah,
it's
no.
more than $1,000. It's just easy math for me to say $1,000, multiply it out.
Yeah, well, you're $4.3 million.
Right,
And
you
it's
know.
probably $10+ million because $1,000 is low.
Right,
I mean,
but it's
normal-
easy, it's easy math.
When Melissa passed out upstairs here when she worked here, it was the deductible, $2,600. And it was
Yeah.
still more than that, but we paid the deductible.
You know, you're speaking of the hospital on page 18 of the Baker Tilly. Henry County, it was specifically listed as an acute, because of the location, an acute care hospital. They could ask for a 0.1% lit. There's about 30 hospitals that were specifically listed in last year's legislation. So I don't know if I'd be pushing Brian a whole lot, because they could be asking for that 110,000 annually.
Yeah, but I mean, that's probably the hospital's motivation, is it's a revenue stream. I mean, I'm certain it is. That's why they do it. There are private companies who do a similar thing. And they do it they don't do it because they want to make sure Bobby's neighbors they'd probably do, but they really want the
Well,
money
yes,
off
because
Bobby's
they're
neighbors.
healthcare people. They want to treat.
They want to
people.
treat, but they also
Yes.
like they like the money that Bobby's neighbor's going to give them. So that's why they really do it at the end of the day. They all want to help. Everybody in healthcare wants to help. I mean, but they don't have an obligation, I guess is
No,
the
they
right
don't.
term. As an elected official, like I feel like we do have that obligation to help. So so there has to be money in this stuff. That's why I don't understand the whole business side of it, because there are companies that do it. So what are we doing? What are we doing wrong? What is Newcastle doing wrong? What is, how's their,
Well, just like when I saw the figures from Andy, a month or two ago, that she had billed over $2 million. And she was forecasted to, after all the write-offs and stuff, somewhere between $600,000 to $900,000 receivables. And it looked like it was going to be possibly under the 600 that she was going to collect.
About
How can you-
500, 580.
the negotiated rates for, insurance carriers are insane.
Just can't.
Yeah,
And
the
basically
negotiated,
the
and
sad
then,
thing is that it's a business, whether you like it or not. We've finally got to a point as a society, we have put a price tag on a human life,
we have,
and that's where we're at. So what are we willing to pay for that life? Because that's where this is what we're dealing with.
and Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements are
They're in the
ridiculously low.
toilet. I mean, you might as well.
Ridiculously
hardly
low.
even get in. So.
Yeah.
Even when they just increased it, it's
Yes,
nothing.
it's still
It-
ridiculously
it
low.
is absolutely nothing.
So,
Because your insurance doesn't keep up, Medicaid doesn't keep up.
And my guess, and I don't know, but my guess is with Reed running their own ambulance service, I don't know that it's a moneymaker for them. I mean, I'd have to look at their numbers, but you know, it's pretty expensive for the hospital to do it as well. Now, they contract with probably Dublin when, you know, when a 911 call comes in, Dublin gets sent out to wherever. Or they have places all over Wayne County. I think they're also into Fayette County as well. I don't know if Wayne County does or not. I haven't
I
asked
know
that
some of
question.
the commissioners
I
and
can
council.
make a phone call and find that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
See,
I
right
do know,
here's-
go ahead.
I was gonna read off just, Mandy gave me this just a little bit ago. For 2024, total charges, $1,721,892.64. Total payments, $545,377.87. Total adjustments, $692,289.63. Total write-off, $26,858.17. So your total payment with no fee was $9,461. Collection rate of 71.9%. So revenue per transport was $349.83. Can you tell me where that math lines up? To where, I mean, you can't operate like this. And I don't know how we fix that.
Is what, sorry.
It's gotta be subsidized somewhere.
It's gonna
And-
cost tax dollars, and the question that I still struggle with is, we know where we are today. We've got a meeting this morning that says where we are today is not going to, to stay the way it is. Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? And how many different ways are there to get there, and what are those ways going to cost? That's where I struggle with. I don't particularly know what our end result is. What's the best end result that us as a county want to have? So how can we make decisions on how to get there without knowing that? So we need to know what that is. And then if it's going to take tax dollars to get there, where do those tax dollars come into play, and how do we get there? That's, I guess as a council member, I feel like my job is to try to help figure out how we're going to get there from a tax dollar standpoint. There's so many questions and so many different opportunities and different ways to get there. All I know is where we're at today, where we're going to be tomorrow, doesn't work. So.
I think we're just talking in generalities now, but I think we need more data.
I
We-
agree.
You know, we can't make any decisions without data, and I understand this is their budget, but I can say my budget at my household is $1 million. And I'm not saying they're being incorrect or giving wrong information, but a budget is one thing. Expenses,
We can go back and look at their expenses.
uh-huh,
We can pull Gateway up,
Yeah.
and it's got ambulance.
yeah.
is
Here's
without.
the bottom line, though. They have a monopoly in Henry County.
I'm not
And
disputing
so
any of
They
that.
could have come in here and asked us for $2.5 million. And we have, we can go back to them and negotiate. And I think we should, and we
Yes.
tried to start laying down some groundwork, I think, this morning in doing that. And I do believe the number will land lower than 900, but where, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, will it be 7? Will it be 8? Will it be 650? I don't know. But all I can say is I feel very confident it's going to be at least double what we're paying now, because I don't see how it won't be. Would you guys agree from our conversation this morning?
I'd say at least double.
So we could audit the heck out of them, and we could try to make the argument that and at the end of the day, they still say, well, if you don't give us X, we're not going to do it. We have no recourse,
I understand that.
because they
but-
get to set their own pricing. And so,
And I don't
That's-
think any of us really feel like the number is far off from reasonable, as much as we know we don't have it.
I
That's the situation, is that it's probably not that inaccurate of a number.
there are things I could pick apart in this, but I'd never get it back down to 300. How's that? I mean, because you know me, I can pick the heck out of any
And you
budget.
tried and they kept having to come back on a
Yeah.
lot of.
I could pick the heck out of a lot. I mean, just like, for example, their insurance costs per employee are 50% greater than ours. They are 50% greater. They average, over, they only have 33 employees and they're 32 employees and they're paying over $800,000 in medical benefits.
So what you're saying is that maybe we don't think they've managed their expenses well and we don't want it to drive up our cost. That would be similar to contracting with a private company and
Yeah.
going in and saying to them, you're not managing your expenses well, we want a lower rate. Doesn't necessarily work that way. This is how they're managing their expenses and they're providing a service to us.
Yeah, we're contracting with a third party. It just so happens to be a municipality whose budget and expenses is on Gateway. But if you go to see Scott and he quotes you 5 different carriers, they can price it wherever they want to. And you could go back and say, well, carrier A, you pay your CEO $1 zillion. I don't care. This is what I'll charge you. If you want my insurance, you buy it for this. And so that's the unfortunate part. We don't have much negotiating power because we're kind of over a barrel, as
I'm
you
not
said
saying
earlier.
that they have mismanaged any of their funds or anything like that. I'm just saying I would like to see more data.
Yeah.
And again, it's the commissioner's decision on how they want to go. But
They did not provide run data in any of this data. But I don't think knowing the,
I just want to see what they
breakdown
came
of the
with
county
besides
that-
just this is my budget times 39%. That's what we want. I just need a little bit more.
Yeah, we need a little bit more information.
I mean, what are, our actual numbers 37, right, Debbie? Residents of the county, Henry County or the counties. The rest falls under others. So, I mean, when you look, and they put all those others in that box too. So reality, we're probably coming out a little bit less than our population at 39 because we do count all those other municipalities and those towns like Caddis and Strawn and all those other towns that are being thrown into this mix, Knightstown especially. So, I don't think their numbers are far off. But I do agree that I would like to see kind of a little more data because I think it would be helpful. And honestly, if you guys are going to quote a third party, that data will be invaluable. So, I don't think it's unreasonable to request detailed reports on, how many runs you make, how many are ALS, how many are BLS, I think they have and again, I'm going off of newspaper articles and things, but in the meeting from the city council that, they seem very heavy in their paramedic numbers, at least according to the city council members. So they questioned that on their payroll. Again, I'm not telling them how to run their department, but that,
I will say that most departments run a paramedic EMT ambulance, not 2 paramedics and a paramedic squad.
yeah. So I think that's,
But again,
argument.
I'm not telling them how to do it. I'm just saying
Yeah,
what most do.
it's hard. We, unfortunately, I don't know that we have the ability to question their management style. As much as we might disagree with some of the things,
Mhm.
just like that case. But I mean,
I mean, they may have a reason why they do it. I just know that most do run a paramedic EMT.
but the bottom line is I think it's gonna cost us more. We're not gonna fix it today, but I think this was a good start to at least get some information and, at least understand where their head's at. And then the plan is that myself, Steve and Debbie are gonna go back and meet with them again at the end of April after the session has landed and we see how bad all of us are gonna come out on this back end of the world. But I think it also gives Steve some time to kind of look at other options and consider what his cohorts are thinking here as far as, potential other avenues that they could look at, whether that be Henry County running the BLS and contracting a paramedic or, contracting a third party service, trying to negotiate with the hospital. I mean, we could go through all these laundry list of things that we come up with, but At the end of the day, I think everybody in this room wants to figure out how do we take care of Henry County citizens the best we can with least amount of negative fiscal impact to their pockets.
Yes.
So, that's I think everybody's on that same page. Nobody can disagree with that thought pattern.
I think when the dust settles on the legislative session, it's going to be a foregone conclusion. We're going to have to eat into our balances. You know, whatever, we had 49% this year, which is outstanding. I think we're going to end up having, because of their decisions at the state level, eating into that and start recapturing some of that just to be able to pay the bills, given like we know our revenues are going to go down considerably next year.
I guarantee you that's going to happen, but that's a very limited runway. We have a very short runway to figure that one out.
And have to evaluate if it's better to adjust the lit in a small amount rather than wait till reserves dip. And do it in a few years and have to do it more.
And maybe a
And-
combination. We
yeah,
may have
I
to
don't know.
adjust some lits up and eat a little bit into our balance that we've been working hard to achieve.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions on the EMS stuff?
I just had one. So, is your goal for your next meeting at the end of April to have a contract price? Or,
I think we're just coming back to the table to discuss where we're really seeing things as what's possible, what's not possible. Give Steve time to get with you guys and you see if you're amenable to other options. And then figuring out if the price is there for those options and then, we can,
And they were gonna know about their contract by then.
Yeah.
To know if they could get out of their contract, because that would change some of the pricing on things too, so.
and I asked them to go back and look at their number and come up with, a better number,
What contract?
The city,
Out of what?
because
the one for the.
that Zoll contract that they entered into for the equipment that's over $200,000 a year, that they really don't need all of that. They're trying to back, I think Joe Harvey and was it Stryker? Their Stryker rep was working hard
Been trying to get it done.
to get out of that contract to save them significant monies. I mean, so yeah, we basically just, they're going to come back with a better news and a better number, hopefully. And then that gives the commissioners time to look at other options and see where we land. But my guess is we're looking at least double. If I had to make a guess. So,
Thank you.
We still have to consider that we have and have had through the years a really good system, even though we're kind of a unicorn. And with the cooperation between the two departments now, hopefully there'll be that type of cooperation between the city powers and this power here that we can continue to work. We know the costs have gone up and everything,
yeah.
but it'd just be great to.
I think our unicorn worked for a long time because the system stayed fairly stable. I think the surrounding system with the billings, the hospitals, the insurance has all shifted. And we are the only thing that's kind of remained somewhat stable. And our stable is no longer able to keep up with all the shifts. And that's why so many of our counterparts in so many of these other counties have shifted to other options. Because it's just, I'm not sure that our system is still sustainable long-term.
And this is not I know we've talked a lot of things, separate, and this is not a us against them.
No,
It's a joint, I don't want anybody to take away that it's the county against the city or the city against the county. It's not. It's a joint problem that needs a joint solution.
no,
So
and they said
I
that
just don't
coming
want
in.
anybody to think that that we're sitting here saying it's an us against them, because it's not an us against them. It's a joint problem that we need to come together to find a solution.
And that was the first thing that came out of the mayor's
Mhm.
mouth this morning is we need to figure out a way to work
Yeah.
together and figure out how to make this work.
Yeah, yeah.
And support each other and, because they're obviously, they're in a similar boat to we are. They're as impacted as we are. Their budget is nearly what ours is. So they're going to be very much impacted by all this. So I think that's why having those outside sources for revenue, like a hospital system or a third, others, that's where they, that's where other counties have had that advantage. But I would be curious to see what our counterparts are paying,
I'm gonna send out an email.
because here's the thing. What the city of Newcastle is asking us to pay is nearly what the city of Muncie pays Delaware County, and they have 75,000 plus citizens. So I just know that. So that's a lot. I said the city of Muncie pays nearly what the city of Newcastle is asking us to pay. And they have 3 times, nearly the citizens. So yeah, that's a lot. So I think it's, there's obviously external influence in that calculation too, third parties. So yeah, okay. Where do you want to go next, Steve? And that was not an option.
So you keep saying that.
I know.
I'd like to talk briefly about these other items on the document I put together before we leave.
Talk about what?
The other items on this document I put
Oh, the
together before we
bonds.
leave, but it can be last if Steve
Okay.
has something else. But before he leaves, because he is itching to leave, I wanted to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bonds are another thing we need to discuss. The only, obviously the budget as a whole, I think everybody understands where we're at after Baker Tilly. Did you get your aha moment a little bit earlier in trying to figure out this county government finance stuff?
Yeah.
It's fun. It's difficult. It's
It's backwards.
A lot of
It is
managing buckets.
absolutely. I will tell you that,
Debits
counties
or
and cities
credits
are the
and credits
richest
or
group of
debits.
people you'll ever meet. Got more money than they know what to do with, but have so many funds are in the red right now. It's not funny. Can't afford to buy anything, but have millions of dollars in the bank. It's a very screwed up way the world works, and you have to forget everything business and logic when you walk in the door.
No, their presentation was huge. I mean, it really was helpful.
Baker Tilly does a phenomenal job. I
Yeah.
will strongly encourage, matter of fact, I will go so far as to request that the commissioners approve the 5-year comprehensive plan from the Baker Tilly, because I think after the April session ends, we're going to need to figure out where we're at. And so we can start a beginning to figure out how to dig out of our holes. I don't know what that cost us, but I know we do have money budgeted for Baker Tilly, and I'm assuming there's
20,000, isn't it? last
there's
year?
some-
It's in legal. I don't know.
So
how much
there's
is
some
budgeted.
money in there, but I mean, if we need to renegotiate that, I'll happily vote to do an additional appropriation for that one. As speaking personally, we don't make decisions in these meetings, but I'll make the motion for that. Well, I won't, but I would.
Not right now, but.
Not
you
right
will.
now, but I'm just saying, I think it's going to be imperative we have that data because it's going to be fun. As far as the other things, the bonds, I know were something, did anybody have anything else they wanted to discuss in, our work session today? I mean, obviously we're gonna, what you got?
What
The
Susan
bonds.
just
Oh, the
mentioned.
bonds. Yeah, definitely the bonds. But, so I mean, obviously budget is going to be very fun this year. So I was kind of hoping some of the department heads were going to show up today, but they didn't. That's okay. I know they're busy people. So, but I would encourage everybody to try to get around to their departments. And just so they know, they understand, they're involved elected officials, and they hear from their different boards and committees across the state, whether it's the recorders or the auditors or the treasurers. They are all, Bill's probably down at conference today, but I
No,
mean-
they're down there, but he's getting tax stuff ready. Jody's getting Form 11s ready.
so, I mean, they are hearing the same things from the State House, that they're gonna have massive impacts. So, we're just gonna have to start early and start having conversations, because I do feel like when we come to budget this year, it's not going to be hey, turn in whatever you want, and then we're gonna roll out the salaries and then figure it out. I think it's gonna be, hey, you gotta go into this thinking you're gonna have to figure out some places to cut some dollars.
I suggest that we have monthly work sessions, at least in April, May, and June. And I'd like to put them on the calendar so we can not have conflicts.
I don't mind having one in April, but as long as we have it after we get something back from the legislation. Yeah, because I think we could sit here and hell, we could all sit here and talk all day long, let's be honest. And we don't know what's going to happen. So I would rather wait until we have some reality of our ASCO, because AIC does a phenomenal job. I know David and Ryan have been all over this stuff and their team has been. So the second that they bang that gavel, I guarantee you AIC will have us something in writing within a matter of
If
moments.
there's not a special session, there has
If
been the
there's
threat
not.
of a special session.
I
So
know. So if,
depending if he gets what he wants or not. If he doesn't get what he wants, then he will call them back into special session.
so I think as soon as we kind of, and then if that happens, then we'll probably have to pivot even more.
Mhm.
But I agree, Ken, and I think going into this, we're gonna have to be proactive and thinking through things. So, but,
Hmm.
Susan, if nobody has anything else, I know you
Yeah.
sent these bonds out. I had a chance to read them. We talked about them a little bit earlier. I can only say from my perspective, like with what Jason said today, I'm gonna be very hesitant to want to vote on any bonds until we figure out what happens. Because obviously the impact could be immense and it could also affect, what we do. I mean, we, for all intents and purposes, have the ability to bond at this point, but it could have a greater impact in 3-4 weeks than it does today. And so,
So I made the suggestion, Susan, I think Joe might have been in there, that we might have to pump the brakes on even thinking about bonding until we figure out where we're at. My biggest thing was the roads, because I knew where these bridges and culverts are gonna fall, and we don't have the resources to do them without making a huge negative impact on what we do on our infrastructure. And I don't like going backwards. We were making such good strides over the last 4 years. I don't want to back up because I was on a couple roads this morning. I took my wife to work and they're starting to break apart, and this freezing and thawing did not help them at all.
yeah, we had a rough winter.
Mhm.
And the downfall to that is, depending on what Jason finds out, we kind of have to tap the brakes on that side until Jason comes back and Lisa Leaf gets comfortable. Now that being said, I don't see the negative impact, and I'll looking at Debbie when I say this, to the commissioners opting to up the
Give the option.
maximum
Right.
amount that we can adjust in our levy for the bridges and,
Yeah.
not
I
to
had-
say that we as a council would vote to go to that max levy, but if you vote to go to the max and we vote to leave it where it's at, it doesn't impact anything negatively the way I understand it. Am I correct, Deb?
You're right.
I had
So-
forgotten it was a two-step. We talked
So-
about that in the budget last year, but I forgot.
So
Yeah.
I don't see any reason the commissioners could not take that preemptive step. But, because it sounds like there's still question as to whether or not these could be funded through a GO bond. And if they can't be funded through a GO bond, then we'd have to fund them through a revenue bond out of the Cume Bridge Fund, which means we may have to change the Cume Bridge Fund, which we're gonna have to look at all the levies anyway this year, because you look at the park is headed south according to that, 5-year plan. The health department is getting a cut. Where would
That's my
my
problem,
predecessor.
is if we raise these levies, somebody gets cut.
Yeah.
And who do you cut? People who are facing the same mechanism we are, that they're gonna get cut. So, I mean, as much as I want these things done, and most of this is to try to keep attracting people, not that I want a Hancock County avalanche and that we can't, we can't handle because we don't have the infrastructure or the ability to do so. But I would like to see some growth in our county, and the only way to do that is improving our infrastructure. And if we keep, it was a thing, and Joe knows it, it was kicked down the road and for decades and never able to actually keep up and get ahead of it. And I'm not saying we're getting ahead of it, but hopefully we're making a small dent now.
Kennan, through both of the Joes, has been telling this body
has
that
been saying
we
it for
way
years.
underfund our
We
Yeah.
do.
Cume Bridge for
There's
the past
no
6
way.
years plus we've been together. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's been a problem. I understand your trepidation in changing the levies.
Oh.
I mean, it's unfortunately, I'm afraid it's going to happen to some point. I like the idea of a potential go bond, but if Lisa Lee says we can't do it, we can't do it. So,
Jason seemed to think there was a decent chance. So
I
like you
mean-
say, it may be something we just have to wait on to.
Well, and he did talk about the loans.
yeah, but the
So,
loans we'd have to fund
I-
from, we
I
couldn't
understand.
fund from property tax, so
I
we'd still have to
Yeah.
finance it out of the levy.
You have to remember one thing, you're gonna do a bond. When, a bond that, because we had one go off last year, so because of that, our tax rate dropped.
Mhm.
Taxes are out there, don't know if you guys know that or not, but we're hearing about it. We're hearing about people's taxes going up $600 to $800 a year. You're gonna put taxes, a bond on, you're gonna put that tax rate back up. I mean, my daughter, for one of them, because she lives in Prairie Township, $55,000 is what her assessed value went up alone.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So we have several districts that are doing that. So you have to remember, if we do keep raising tax rates, they're not at their 1%, their taxes continue to go up, you're gonna have a lot more people going in the tax sale.
Well, I can tell you that my taxes, and this was back right before I took office, did the same thing. They readjusted those townships and my townships skyrocketed. My taxes went from $1,700 to $2,800. And when I bought my house, my taxes were $1,700. They're now $3,600, and I've lived in my house 10 years.
I think it's
You still green.
Third time's a charm. You got it.
That's why the governor did such an extreme request on Senate Bill 1, because because of assessed valuations skyrocketing in the last 3 years, necessarily because in Indiana, it's tied to assessed values. They're skyrocketing. And that's not necessarily anything but that's the way it's set up in the state. But in retrospect, what's going to happen is his proposals, if they go back into special session, are going to hurt us almost, I can't even calculate hardly how much that's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt us immensely. So we'll know more at the end of April, but right now it doesn't look good. When they tap it, we were complaining when they capped it at 4% the last 2 years. It's 0% next year. And our expenses are going to go up 5 to 10%. We know that because that's what inflation has done on most of the things that we have to purchase. So
Well, and we are creeping up. Just curiously, when Bobby asked the question earlier, I started looking up some houses. And some of us have hit the circuit. I hit the circuit breaker this year. Kenan hit the circuit breaker this
Jody
year.
and I figured about 95%, or maybe a little more.
It depends. You guys have some farm ground that skews your numbers. I haven't gotten to looking up yours. I haven't looked up yours yet. I don't know if you hit the circuit breaker or not. But I mean,
I know what I pay in property taxes and I'm not going to say it. And it's pretty low. But I live in Strawn.
what is public
Uh,
knowledge?
It's pretty, yeah. It's pretty low. And so I can guarantee you I haven't,
I think she's due for reassessment.
no, I've been
And you know,
reassessed.
you have these ones that we already know next year are gonna go up. I mean, just like the ones that went up, my daughter's went up 55,000 this year. She's gonna go up another 30,000 next year, because that's what's happening in Prairie Township.
Cause it's
And
exploding.
several of the other ones, for whatever reason, you know, there's a few of those that people are just going to. You know, you have a family of 3 kids and 2 of them in college. How do you pay $2,500 a year in taxes?
Yeah, Debbie told me mine went up $100.
Mine actually
No, I
went-
haven't looked at, I actually haven't
A
looked
lot
at
of
Mine
mine.
actually
people's
went
did go
down.
Except for some townships, certain ones.
Mine actually went down this year. Mine went down slightly this year.
About that Stony Creek Township.
I don't know about. some. Can't remember. Blue
I don't
River
think
was
yours had
another
hit.
one.
I always
I-
just
I-
wait till I get my mortgage statement and it's a surprise.
But believe me, we're getting the phone calls. People know they're out there. and they're
Yeah.
not happy.
I hit the circuit breaker.
You hit the circuit breaker?
Yeah, that's what that says right
Yep,
there.
you hit the circuit breaker for sure. You hit it big time. You in the city?
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, I have not hit the circuit breaker.
You have not.
Mm-mm. Nope.
The decisions we make are not going to make that much significant difference, nearly as much as just the fact we're based on assessed values and they're skyrocketing.
Mhm.
That's 90% of it. Decisions we make might affect 10% of a tax bill.
Hey, we went down a rabbit hole. We need to get Steve out of here. Circle back.
So what I wanted to do with this, even though I know that we're not in a position to make a decision, I still think it's appropriate for the commissioners to come to the council and say, we have these needs and we just want to open up a discussion. And so the second item is servers. And just to kind of go over quickly what I put here, we have 19 servers in total and 7 of them have reached their end of life. Most of our hardware is up to date and current because of some ARP funds. But we do have these 7 servers, and right now Jeff is trying to figure out exactly what should be replaced. He doesn't think we need 7 new ones. He thinks he can consolidate. He's trying to figure out exactly what that would look like. I asked him, can you give me some type of upper? And he said no, because the biggest expense is the licenses, and until I go through the whole process, he didn't want to give me any number at all. So
So we have no idea how
100,000,
much the server costs.
200,000.
The
Oh,
servers are-
servers are pretty expensive here at the county. I'd have to go back and look what Lisa just spent. Lisa's was replaced. Yours was replaced, and yeah.
And how much?
I want to say it was, I want to say it was more than that
I
when
think
you
it was
add in all the
20, 25,
licensing.
30 somewhere, and
Okay.
the licensing is what is crazy.
Licensing
It's not
is-
the hardware.
And
it's the
especially when you're
licensing.
looking at replacing an exchange server, the licensing for an exchange server it could push 6 figures.
Yes, the licensing is what's nuts. It's not the
Licensing
hardware.
is, especially for exchange, because it's user-based. Mm-hmm, yep.
So-
So
So I had
it,
that
it
conversation.
could be a couple $100,000 easy
Yeah.
to replace them.
So this is without a number. All this is just saying is the need is there. We have put money into the budget this year that wasn't there before to start working on a regular kind of replacement plan. And it would be great if we could start with current equipment and then figure out an appropriate amount of money that could be budgeted each year to keep that equipment current.
Do you recall how much?
It was
It was-
300.
Yeah, and then we negotiated it down a little bit at the closer
The
to,
number's 300 now, but it wasn't 0 before. So is it 150 that we increased it by?
I think somewhere in that vicinity.
So
180, 150 or 180 more than last year.
I will jump in here and piggyback on the servers with what, so Jeff reached out to me and I talked to him because you're right. Back when we got the first round of federal funds, not the ARPA funds, but the first round of federal funds, we bought all new computers for everybody in the county.
No,
And the
isn't
problem
it
with that is that was 4 years ago.
Right.
And these things, I'll defer to the IT expert over here, but you got 4 to 6 years max on most of these units. So here in another year or two, we're going to be backed right up against the corner that they're all going to be out of date and obsolete. And if we don't start getting on some type of an annual program, because what 200 and how many? 290? It's an,
100.
yeah, it's right at
It's
300
300.
now. He shot out the exact,
Yeah.
but we have a lot. And so if they only last every 5 years and you got to replace 60 a year and you're spending what, 800-ish, 800 to
I wish.
1,000?
I don't know what government pricing is, but I can't sell a laptop.
Well, I think
for
that's what the Dells
$800.
were back when we bought them. They were around, I think we replaced them all for like $500,000.
I don't know what government pricing is through Dell, but man, if I could make money and sell them $800, I would.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
I'm
think-
selling laptops 1,800
Okay.
easy.
I think ours is a lot less
And they're
than that.
Dells.
But let's just throw $1,000 again to make Bobby's
mhm.
easy math, like you said
Yeah.
earlier. You know, if we got to spend $60,000 a year and then we got to pay Jeff to set them up and, you know, then on top of that, you know, all the regular maintenance and
And
other
hardware.
others
Yeah,
that
the
go with
networking
it,
hardware.
that the additional laptops, docking stations, monitors. Monitors tend to last a lot longer than the CPUs or the
I have
laptops.
some clients that have monitors from 10 years ago.
But the docking stations may have changed from this one to that
Mhm.
one. And so, you know, we are going to have to definitely start getting on a rotation.
without Jeff providing an estimate. I mean, we talking about 250,000 for these servers. Is that a
I'm
round?
thinking like 100 to 300, but he.
I'm going to say 100. Don't even look at 100.
Okay,
That's not even, don't even look at 100.
okay.
So,
what- so
I'm going to
about
say
100?
2 to 3.
okay,
Okay.
250, just a round.
250.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because licensing is 100, close to.
Okay.
So
250 for now.
So, and I would think we're gonna have to budget at least another 100 or so a year
year.
just for replacement. Would you think that
Say that again,
100
please.
a year at least for a routine replacement of our computers?
But 250 now. And look at long-term
Right.
budgeting annually.
Yeah, so what
now,
I'm.
now don't put that 250 in a
No.
hard number.
No one's giving you, I know,
don't
I
have
was
a
the same
pencil.
way, like,
Okay.
could I have any number at all? And Jeff says no.
Yeah.
Number.
Oh, it's gonna be on Shannon's spreadsheet. You're in trouble, Bobby. Put together a spreadsheet, will you, Shannon, quickly? No, you do a good job on the spreadsheets. You're good. You put that one together.
Okay, so for the sake of expediency, number 3, and I want to just talk through my thinking, and I know that everyone has strong opinions about this, but right now, the status of the Expo project is they are trying to seek a grant for the first building, but there's still no timing really set for the 4-H barns. I've been talking with Jim Ward. I don't know how many of you know Jim Ward, but he is very intelligent. He's working with the Expo board to try to help them find a path forward and providing some project management, which I'm starting to be very thankful for. However, we have a need for 4-H barns now. I think the recommendation from our building inspector is at a minimum, we should have the barns professionally evaluated by a structural engineer for safety. And so that is my thinking as I sit in this seat is if we're going to plan on having 4-H there this year, we should probably follow our building inspector's suggestion to have them professionally evaluated to see what that says. And as I've been talking with Jim, I feel like his insight is really valuable. He says, just because we restore these barns now does not mean if the Expo gets funding together for 5 to 7 years from now to get the more elaborate version of the barns together. I'm not sure, exactly their path and their timing. That doesn't mean that this money is wasted. Those facilities, if they're restored, can still be used for other things. And we provided a safe 4-H building for now. And so this is something to just say out loud so people can start thinking about, maybe thinking about it in a different way. For 1.3 million or less, we can completely restore what we have now. And Jim's words are that it will be very nice. We'll be able to be very proud of it. And it will be a good facility for our 4-H now. My big concern with the Expo project has been timing. I'm afraid that if we don't have new barns for 5 to 7 years, our 4-H program will bleed out into surrounding counties. People in the north will go to Delaware County. We'll have people go to Hancock. We'll have people go to Rusher. And we really, if we want to nurture 4-H, we need a facility now that's safe. And so I think I'm raising it to see if anyone wants to consider broadening their thinking. I think that separating the Expo from this immediate need for 4-H barns is possibly a good path forward for the county. The commissioners voted to let the Expo board apply for a grant to try to get the first building done. And so that is kind of a de facto decision to allow them to continue forward for a period of time. And here we come towards 4-H season again with barns again that may or may not stand and electrical wiring that's concerning. So that's my introduction.
Awesome. No, that's very accurate. Full disclosure, I'm on the Expo board. Joel has said I should and can remain. I just won't vote on any funding to the Expo. But everything she has said is 100% accurate. It looks like the first building will get done. The grants are moving forward very well. Long time frame on the barns. The only thing I would add is I have got information. Someone told me that the county got a soil survey, and that recommendation was not to replace those barns. Can anybody add to
So
that?
I was a
There-
member of the
there
park
is-
board. I was the park board president when that happened. And there was a soil boring done. And they said it was not cost effective because the plan was to raise those buildings and then build back on top of that. That was the original plan
Right.
before the whole expo.
Before the, a long time ago. Yeah.
deal got involved. And so that by taking the buildings down, rebuilding on that site, the problem was it would not be cost effective because you have to go down so low to hit.
15 feet supposedly before you hit anything solid.
Yeah, you
because
to
where
get
the
your-
setting is actually where a landfill used to be, the
Yeah.
highway garage used to be where the Smith building is now.
Wow. 15.
15.
Now, that being said, those buildings have stood since the
what-
1950s.
I'm not an engineer, but Jim is, and he has gone through with a group of Amish workers and his expertise. And and he's confident that they can,
We're talking though, with this, it's talking, sorry. He's discussing just basically rebuilding what was there, maybe in a slightly
Right.
different
Just
configuration.
renovating, not rebuilding,
Renovating,
just
yeah.
taking the
Right,
structure
I
that's
mean,
there and renovating.
Yeah, I had a
It's-
discussion with him as well, and he was talking about changing the way something is situated so that water flows in the
Improving
right direction.
drainage.
So I think, does anybody have copies of these soil borings and the results that we can
There are
give?
tests
to-
back there in the office. It's a 500-page document, notebook or whatever.
From Steel Core.
Steel
Steel
core.
Core is
we
who
should
did it.
invite Jim to come.
I says,
and
is there any issue with him looking through that?
Nope, J.R. Martin's been up here and looked at it. Matter of fact, I printed off like 40 pages of it. And he decided to come up and look at the whole thing prior. There's nothing definitive, in my opinion, in there that said that the building couldn't have been rebuilt where it was. There was just a lot of sand and the holes as they drilled were collapsing. That was the issue.
Gotcha.
So I know we have
Well-
technology and stuff. My only issue, and I've said this to Jim, and I've said it here and I'll say it again. If we are putting million plus into refurbishing buildings, a building cost, if it's a 40 by 60, 120 by 200, however big it is. I don't care if you put it in the middle of the Potomac River, you put it in the middle of the Sahara Desert, the basic cost of that structure is the same. If you're going to rebuild a building, why not build it where you're building the new buildings that you have? That's my only thing, because even if you redo and you refurbish, which we've spent a bunch of money on electric on the existing barns the last 2 years, because I've been over there overseeing it when it's been done to help fix the wiring and the water problem, which is getting people shocked. So refurbishing the existing building isn't going to eliminate the water and people getting shocked after they've been there. So you're still going to have to tear down completely, gut, renovate, start over. So as a taxpayer, if you're going to spend that kind of money, I want to see something new for the buck that you're spending that's mine.
There is a quote to completely redo the electrical. So I think we are resolving the electrical, we're resolving the drainage, we're fixing the restroom and creating a like new restored structure. And the issue with putting it with the first building is that the first building isn't done. You know, this is something that can be done in 3 or 4 months. The
You're not
first,
even going to get it done this year.
No, you won't,
There's
because
no
the,
way.
because
You can't just
at
sign
$1.3 million,
release and-
you have to, there's procedures you have to go through. You
Put
just
it out
can't
for
sign a
bidding. You
contract.
wouldn't get it done this year.
Well, and you have to remember,
That's-
there's a big show. Gotta weigh in, there's sheep weigh in, there's goats weigh in, and dogs start 2 months before 4-H will get involved. So you're gonna have to redo all. I mean, I know that the weigh-ins and the swine show, it's already scheduled, they've already advertised it, so.
You mean it would mess with 4-H's schedule
Yeah.
horribly?
If you're gonna do
Okay.
it Now, then you need to make sure you get a hold of us, because they're gonna have to change everything that they've done. So-
That's my only fear is
Mhm.
we won't be able to get it done in time for.
For this year? No.
No,
I-
well, and
I
the
would
whole
s-
process, because it reached that threshold, you can't just say, okay, we're gonna take Jim Ward's plan and go with it.
Because we'd have to put it out for bids
Yeah.
and you'd have to have proposals, you'd have to have design release from the state, which
Mhm.
permitting. All these things would have to go through. Because trust me, if it was that easy.
It'd been
I'd
done.
recommend
Sorry,
it 4
sorry to
years
interrupt.
ago.
Does anybody think Joel needs to join us again?
No.
I don't think
Okay.
so,
Thanks.
no. So when you were talking about the cost of the building, no matter where you put it, were you thinking of putting the barn somewhere other than where it is?
I think, here's my thought. I don't know, and I agree with Susan. I don't know what's gonna happen with the expo. You're on the board and I know that if I talk to Brianna, you and Duke, that and I love your optimism,
So have you
Well-
raised those funds yet?
but my concern.
We'll get you. Yeah.
My concern is the same as Susan's. This has been going on we're pushing 7 years now.
Yeah.
And so I have issues. I agree with her 100% there. But we have given you another opportunity. And if you make good on.
Them, let's say them, okay? I'm a councilman today.
Yes.
Okay,
But
them.
we've given them
Yeah.
an opportunity
Yeah.
to hopefully
Yep.
complete that project, or at least get it close to done. We have the money for the infrastructure as far as the water going up through there, that hopefully we'll be able to get started pretty soon, because that's going to benefit both sides of County Road 100. But if my concern is, when we're spending this money, do we spend it at the same spot? Because if that all works out, then we accomplish what was originally intended and it's all together. And I would rather see it together than I would see it split apart or have to spend the money twice, because if we refurbish for that, because if Jim's confident he can do it there, then to Susan's point, we can do it wherever, and they have new facilities, because I don't want to have, just like the last several years, you think you got the problem fixed because people come in, we tear up, we redo, we spend money, and then 3 or 4 days or maybe a week, everything's great. Then all of a sudden I get a phone call, somebody gets shocked
Yeah.
because they were running water and they walked over and their animal was getting shocked or they got shocked. And you're trying to figure out, you have unhooked, redone, moved stuff, replumbed, rewired. So what is it that's still causing these issues? So until we completely, my opinion, level that thing, jackhammer everything up and start over. And if you're gonna do that, you're starting over from scratch, then put it wherever it needs to go if you're gonna spend that kind of money. My only concern is by keeping it separated, because I would not be not opposed, I wouldn't be as in favor of building another building where the new building is, if we spend this kind of money refurbishing the building over here. Because to me, it's a waste of taxpayer money.
I think the question is, what's the difference in cost and the difference in timing? Because right now, over by the expo building, we also have a ground prep issue
Well-
that would need to be resolved before we put something else there.
So here's where my thought pattern is personally. So I know, again, when I was on the park board and all of this mess started, and this whole Boris, all that, we had a quote from Steel Corps to put in the building and several others. It came in about $1.8 million to rebuild about what we had then. I would estimate that's gone up exponentially. I don't know what the Expo's quote is to raise
For the barns?
the barns and the arena,
I don't think they have a
but I would,
current quote.
I would assume that it's probably doubled. I would think it's in the $3+ million range to do something similar, because this again was 8-9 years ago.
Yeah, so in the past
When
year and a
they're
half,
10
the
yeah,
expo
7,
board
8
has been changed out. That's
Yeah.
how Ducam and I, James Hamilton, Mont Switzer came on the board, because they got rid of a lot of the old ones. So we've only been in it past year and a half.
Yeah.
Laser focused on this first building, not focused on the barns. So we don't even have a timeline on that.
So,
Yeah.
but I agree with Steve. I would not want to spend $1.3 million in this spot if their plan is to just turn around and do that. Because what happens to this $1.3 million building?
But it's going to be in 5 to 7 years.
I
What
do-
happens if we have a structural engineer come out and he says it's not safe?
It
I'm
needs
gonna have
fixed. It's a
to-
mess,
I'm
right?
Well,
gonna have
and-
to
We
make a
will.
Motion to not have 4-H this year.
And-
If the report comes back and says people shouldn't be in it.
And you and I talked, if Purdue is saying they are wanting these things to go regional, if I have to make a decision whether I send somebody to Bobby's neighbor's house or I build a 4-H barn, I can promise you which one I'm gonna pick. But you know what that's what I'm saying is that, you know,
We have to choose
we're,
between
we are
ambulance
going to have to
service and
make
4-H
very
barns.
difficult decisions in the very near future.
That's,
And, you know, we're going to have to make some very and I know this affects, you know, families in this room for sure.
my question,
Ambulance service affects every family in this room.
Susan.
And it's a tough situation, but I can't
Like-
spend $1.3 million today to solve a problem today. And then what's it going to be next in 5 years if they build another building?
I expressed the same exact concerns you guys expressed about why would we build it here as opposed to across the street. Timing, earthwork, expenses, those kind of things were expressed. I am not a 4-H person. I did not raise animals grow up, but I have had people reach out to me that are 4-H people, frustrated with the amount of time things have taken. I've had somebody tell me that what's out there should be condemned, and I was like, well, I'm sure we've had people look at it and make repairs and stuff. Our building inspector walked through, is that what you said?
He's
Not
looked
long
at
ago.
it and he told me that he suggested that it be professionally evaluated.
So
I
are
think
we,
He feels like there is a good chance
that it
Well,
could
that
be?
it should not be
We're
used
at the point where we didn't do this in a timely manner.
because
Mhm.
of.
Now we are affecting kids who've already started these projects with a
Abs-
lot of money invested.
Absolutely.
And we are affecting them now, which is really sad.
I agree.
I absolutely agree. And I guess from my standpoint, I don't know where we are as far as whether they can actually do their 4-H shows and projects out there this year. Are we in a position to say, yes, it's okay? Or are we in a position to say, no, you shouldn't do that?
I mean, if the building inspector says to me that his recommendation is to have it professionally evaluated.
So maybe
I
we
feel
need to have it-
responsible to do that.
We need to have it professionally evaluated. And so the commissioners can make that happen. I assume
We can.
nothing money
I
won't
have-
fix, right?
I know.
Right, I know.
That's my thing, and
it is too late.
you
But
could,
that doesn't mean we should let an unsafe building be used and let someone get hurt. I don't think.
Nobody is suggesting.
I mean, I've been told for 4 years that that building should have been condemned. So, but we've had 4-H fair for 4 years. It could fall tomorrow, it could last another 30 years, the way it is. I mean, and you can get 10 different structural engineers out there, get 10 different responses. So, I mean, I got the same thing when we did the EMS building here across the way. We were told to tear it down. So, and
Well,
now.
I will tell you, Steel Corps told us back when they started this whole process, and there were several commissioners that were in attendance along with council and others that, you know, the guy could take a pocket knife and stick it right through the main support beam back then. I mean, and so, and it's right. It's very subjective. So if you have a third party, obviously I would not want the person who gave this quote to be the inspector. I would think, but again, that's not my decision. That's your guys's. But I mean, you could have 3 different people come in there and give you 3 different answers. It's just,
All right.
It's just human nature.
it is.
It's
And,
whatever, if somebody likes something or
But-
doesn't like something, sometimes you get.
Can I ask you a question for?
but I think insurance wise, you've opened a door now that we have to close. If you have a open public meeting now
It's
listed,
gonna have to be looked at.
it's going to have to be addressed from a fiscal perspective. My concern is now we're on the hook if somebody does get hurt. So the commissioners are definitely going to have to take action.
I think we were on the
Uh,
hook before.
Oh, I think we are too, but now we definitely have to take action to look at this because it has to be addressed if there's concerns with the building. And I've shared some of those concerns because I've shared it way back when I attended a circus and somebody was doing a trapeze act.
Steel Corps said there was a concern with safety. Building inspector agrees, and Jim agrees, and I know everyone probably,
I think we
who's
all
Jim,
agree. It's,
that we all agree that it's possibly an issue, so.
I would
I
like
mean,
to
it's a
see-
70-year-old building plus
Why can't
70
we
years.
just get out 4-H now that you're doing this.
Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
agree.
There is not going to possibly.
We'd not be 4-H.
You're gonna devastate kids.
Yep.
But it needs to be out there now to Justin and Kelsey.
I think we need a structural engineer and we don't need 5 of them. But again, just like the EMS, we're gonna need a little bit more data. If a structural engineer says it is unsafe as is, then we have to close it.
Can I ask a question for the money
Oh.
guy?
Get
Okay.
two structures.
Yes,
Is there
try-
a city where you come in and
So-
go,
The
"This is
question
Research
I
a good
had
structural
for
engineer,
Jason-
people agree is
Hang on.
outstanding.
Do what?
Okay.
I didn't hear.
I said, you just need one structural engineer who comes highly recommended. You can vet that. And we just need that information. Is it fixable with this plan? Or is it unsafe as is? If it's unsafe as is, you don't have an option. You have to close it.
Correct. Going
And I
back,
think if we make that decision, we also need to look at alternative for 4-H for this year or even the upcoming year after that. What would be a feasible option? Where are we gonna host the fair at this year? Can we come up with something along that line to help ease the pain of having to do something out there if we need to do it immediately?
So I know my understanding quickly, and I'll tell you that
Thank
they,
you.
they are, Purdue is recognizing this across the whole state, and they're starting to regionalize these 4-H fairs,
No, they regionalize the director.
the directors,
There's
but
still going to be 4-H in every county, but they regionalize the director only because they realize that people can't afford to travel to other counties. So I do know that for a fact.
okay, well, I got a different answer, so that, I'd be
I
curious
do
to see
know
what you
some people in our county are already going.
combining to others, but you have a money question, so you go for it,
oh,
Scott.
thanks. Okay. Jason earlier said, if we don't do the bond, we don't have extra money sitting in our bank account. So if we're discussing whether we do a bond or not, then how would that affect EMS? I mean, if we don't do the bond, we're not gonna have extra money for EMS. That's what he said. There's
So-
no extra money in our general fund. How?
There, it's not extra money in the general fund. The bonds go for specific projects, so they're not
But
general
there's no
funds
debt
money.
service. If we don't do the bond, there's no debt service, but he said it would, our tax rates would go down. We would
Our
not have-
tax rate would go down, which means what everybody in here pays in property taxes would go
Right.
down.
So,
So-
how, well, somebody said, well, if it's a question between doing this bond and paying for ambulances, it doesn't affect each other,
Yeah.
right? Am I understanding what he said?
Well, could have some impact, but yet no, it's not a direct impact.
Okay.
It's not a direct. So, but if I let the tax rate go down on property taxes, but then I raise the lit tax to pay for the ambulance service, that's how it
That's
is,
fine,
how it
okay.
impacts it.
Fine.
Because we may have to bump the lit tax, but then we let people's property tax go down even further to accommodate. That would be the correlation. It wouldn't be
That's the
the, it wouldn't be the line to line, but there'd be take from here to give to there kind of scenario. Does that make more sense?
That's what I wanted. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, again, it's this whole silos thing. The whole world works so screwy in
Right.
county government.
But what we do know is no matter where this is built or redone, it's not going to be completed before 4-H this year because there's a whole process that has to be done. It has. like
4-H
Steve
is in
said,
July,
It
right?
has to be engineered. It has, you have to put it out to RFP. I mean, there's a whole process because it's over $1 million. You can't just sign a contract with somebody for $1 million
Well, and
project.
here's my concern, and I'm going to throw this out here. If this building is built, if this building is redone and revamped or rebuilt or whatever, has somebody ran it by to see if it's going to have fire suppression? Because the water ain't there yet. That was the whole problem with the expo. There's this definitely of the square footage
Well,
that
because
would
there's
have
going
to
to
have.
be, well, I don't know. And plus, there's going to be people in the building, so you have to get the state design release and
Yeah, I
they're the
mean,
ones that
so
dictate what
I
happens.
think that's
mean,
what
it's a
hit
whole
with the
big, long
expo. Has
process.
that been ran up the flagpole with the state approval process?
Well,
It's been broached at some point.
no, I was just gonna say, the great thing about talking to Jim is he genuinely just wants to help us find a path forward. If this is not what is the best plan, if the best plan is to put it up by the new building, he would be happy to quote that too and bring it back to us. He's just serving our county and donating his expertise from everything that I can tell. And so I'm not saying this is the thing to do. I'm just saying, let's think about a path forward. Let's evaluate the barns to see if they're safe. And then let's work, see if we have an interest in restoring what we have. Maybe we are not going to restore it and they're not safe, and maybe we're done until the next, let's actually say out loud all the things that we're worried about and thinking that we've maybe not said out loud the last 5 years. And let's decide, how to go forward.
I think they're an embarrassment right now. I think they're unsafe right now. I think Steve would agree, if we have to fiddle with electrical and people getting shocked, even though it's a low current. I think the next step is to get a structural engineer to advise us.
Okay, on the big picture, I think the expo board will finish the first building. I'm pretty confident based on the fundraising going on, the additional grants they've gone out and got that you guys may not even be aware of. There's a matching grant for what they're raising to get to that 160 grand. It looks very, very promising. I would not wait on them to finish the second building, the barn. That's the best plan to get a 4-H barn, not the expo. That's a long way down the road.
Well, the thing is though, if you're finishing that one, and if we're bonding to pay for that one, why would we not bond to pay to finish it next to the new building is what I'm saying.
If it's the same
that's-
price,
yeah,
that's the right
I
question.
totally agree with
If
that,
it's
but
Twice the cost.
I
maybe
just
it's
didn't
not
want
worth
anybody
it.
sitting around thinking the expo's going to get the barn done. That's the best route to get a barn for 4-H, wherever you want to put it.
Because here's my other concern, and y'all can laugh at me if you want, but here, and you finish the expo building you're doing now. I'm assuming then that for the most part, once that's completed and it's able to be used, the stuff that you're doing in the Smith building, the crafts and those kind of things will probably be moved to that building. the
That's
new-
a 4-H question.
I'm just
I would
saying.
agree. They probably
Okay.
will.
So then.
I think
if-
that was the original plan.
So then, because I'm assuming there's more room, because I know how crowded it was in the Smith building this year when I went through it.
Right.
So if you're over here, my concern is if we build new 4-H barns where they're at now, and you got a family over here that has a child who has something in there, and they have a smaller child sitting there, and they have across the road, the brother showing a hog or whatever. And all of a sudden, they're waiting because they're judging, doing whatever. The smallest one gets a little anxious and wants to go see what little brother or big brother's doing. And they go, be careful crossing the road. So now they're running over here to cross the road. Here comes Harriet and Ethel driving over the hill, and they look over and, what's going on over the new 4-H barns? And splat.
So you're
Little-
thinking if we put the barns in a bond, it should be on this south side. It would make
To
more
me,
sense.
I don't want to set, because at that point, we've opened ourselves up.
Right. You don't want to
because-
separate it. Makes sense.
Because now you've got people, I don't want to destroy somebody's family because they run across the road. If we can help it. And if this does it to where we prevent that and we keep it centrally located, if we're spending that money, I would just soon spend it at one spot than I would have it spread out and then we're everywhere. Because I don't want to be the cause that some child gets ran over. I'm not saying we can prevent that, but I don't want to add to it.
Right. Just for clarity, if we do decide to put the barn in the bond, that is not giving money to the expo.
Correct. It's
Correct.
just building a
Okay.
4-H.
I know that. I just
Oh,
want to
you
make
just
sure
wanted to
it's all out
clarify
there
it. Yeah,
for
Because-
public
Because
purpose.
this
Okay.
is, this is the thing, and this is where the waters get really muddy when people mention Expo and the 4-H. I understand the premise of Expo because the reason the 4-H barns are in the condition they are is nobody in this county can support those buildings and keep them up based on 2 weeks of 4-H activity. It's just not financially practical that it will happen. So no matter what you do, there has to be a funding mechanism somewhere to maintain those facilities. And I understand that was the reason the Expo idea was formed, was you have to have other things going on throughout the year to help offset that cost of upkeep and operation. If you don't, then in 10, 20 years, what you're building now is going to wind up with just like what we have
Yep.
existing. because there's no way to financially sustain it.
Makes
So-
sense. Yep.
That's my concern is we have to have a way to keep this up. If not, we're gonna wind up in a few years right back where we are now.
So I'm going to ask this question as Chad, taxpayer, not council member, because I know I'm going to get this question. In your thought pattern of putting the building barns, 4-H facilities besides the expo center, who is going to maintain them, oversee them, get the rental revenue, do the maintenance, all of that?
You got the same issue you got right now with the barns that we have.
That's what I'm asking.
Who takes?
Because he says it's not giving money to the expo, so then the expo won't have any of those as the answer to it.
Charge according to the contract, correct, to maintain their building? Is that to the county to maintain it?
The original agreement, if I understood it, was there was supposed to be an administrator, but as far as operating the building, but after it was open, I think it's a year after construction, I think the expo board was supposed to take care of maintaining and operating the structure itself.
Because I know
Even though it
that's,
belongs to the county. It's the same as the saddle barns. Saddle
Yeah.
Club, we don't put money in those buildings. They maintain it. and that
They
board
do.
takes care of it.
but I know that's, I mean, when he says they're not giving money to the expo, then that means they're not going to have any controlling power or decision-making or anything after the
So
fact.
the lease would need to be renegotiated to specify.
Those are things I think that need to be done once everything's completed anyway. I think there needs to be, I think the agreement that is in place
So
currently
the answer is not necessarily what you said, because I'm going to get questions.
Well, it's like everything else, and I think you got your eyes open that meeting we were over there. Once that facility is done, it belongs to county. It
County
doesn't belong
owns
to
it.
the expo. It belongs to county.
County owns it.
But you still have, I mean, same as the Saddle Club barns. Once
Mhm.
they're built, they belong to the county. Anything that's put, once you set a post in the ground, it belongs to the county. It's county property. But the Saddle Club maintains those buildings through their shows and things that they have. You're gonna have the same thing with whatever we do. If, whether you call it expo, whether you call it 4-H facilities, you have the same thing. Hancock County, they have events going on all the time that aren't 4-H related at their facilities. You have the same thing, I think, in Tipton County. You have events going on that are not necessarily 4-H, but those events generate income to help go towards maintaining facilities. And you're gonna have the same thing if it was part of the park.
Yeah, it's just a decision down the road. Who,
Mhm.
if we build that other barn,
Mhm.
who's going to maintain it? The park, the 4-H, the expo, or the county
Or
directly,
all together.
or all together?
I want to,
So,
I think these are things that once everything is completed, we're gonna have to set.
So the
down
answer is
and have
nobody
agreement.
knows right now. So it could
Well,
potentially be
yeah.
going to the expo, because that's going to be a question I get frequently.
I want to clarify the financial piece because not everyone has talked to Jim, but he is planning to restore the arena, restore the dog show area, redo all the pins behind and restore the rabbit barn. And so this 1.3 million, I have to think is going to be significantly less than all new up by the new building. So I'm not saying that that's not the right thing to do because I definitely see what Steve is saying. But I don't think 1.3 million is going to get a new structure up. So I
think
still
it's
think
gonna
the
be at
right
least-
thing is to get the information and
Well, so I
figure
think
it
we need
out.
to get more from Jim because when I talked to him, I thought his plan was to save just the arena and tear everything else down and then put a new structure. That was when he first talked to me. That was what I was told.
we
he
got a
was doing.
different,
Okay.
did you get the designs?
I've got them on my
Okay.
desk.
So so we need to make sure we understand this plan, figure out what as option number 2 would be up by the expo building.
And I thought he was working with them to
Yeah.
decide whether it was gonna go there or there. He was
Yeah.
doing both because the expo board had asked him to
Mhm.
help with both
Yeah.
sides, so.
What he's doing right now is excellent because he's working with the expo board and he's talking to us and he's really providing a facilitation that's really critical.
he's mainly doing project management work for the board.
But I know he sat down with JR, because him and JR had a nice long talk and
Yep.
went over the whole plans of trying to do it. Because the problem I was told was, and even with Jim's building, is the fact that it's still not big enough to accommodate what you need for 4-H. It need, because that was the problem with where it's at now is, it was roughly, I thought he said maybe, I forget how many square feet short where you're at now. So
Where the
it needed to
4-H
be-
is at now, that
Yes,
barn.
needed to
From
be bigger.
what I've, my kids aren't 4-H anymore a
Yeah.
long time, but they bring in one set of animals and have that show, get them out. Then they
Yes.
have to bring in the next set, get
Yes.
them out. So it's not a cohesive fair. It's a bunch of little fairs running the same week,
Yes.
which is not what
Yeah.
anybody wants.
Yeah.
You have days come in, they leave the same day.
Yep.
No.
You know, you have them come in. So I have a question for Steve.
Yes.
If we just refurbish these and the 150 for electrical, don't we have to dig up, like you and I had this conversation, to get the electric and water fixed? You're gonna have to remove the foundation to go underneath it.
Because
So
it's
does
buried.
that include this?
See, I'm not sure. These are other questions that I didn't have answered
My discussion with Jim does.
For,
because I didn't have discussion with him on, it was just the structure part itself.
I guess as a taxpayer, I kind of have a problem with putting 1.3 million in it. And then eventually going across the road and doing, because we've already given, nothing against the expo, but we've already given 7 years ago, $1.2 million to the expo that's not done. Well, now we're gonna spend my tax dollar putting back a barn. My grandkids are in 4-H. I'm a huge 4-H person. But to put 1.3 million of my tax dollars there to turn around, probably gonna have to put them over there because I can't see us being able to raise that much money again
Mm-hmm.
to build those barns. You know, sitting here talking about people's taxes going up $600 and $800 a year, that's all we're gonna continue to do to these people.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's right. That's me as a taxpayer. And that's me listening to my phone calls
Yeah.
that I
Mhm.
get.
I
You,
think-
you don't want to have to double spend money,
Yeah.
in my personal
It'd have
opinion.
been
My
nice
tax dollars, I don't want to,
Taking 1.2
double spend it.
put in the
And just
building
put it in the
first
barns.
place.
Well, I think, I love this conversation. I think can we have 4-H in the barns this year? If we can't, can we do it someplace else? And then can we get more information about comparing this quote to putting up on the hill? And then we got to decide if we'll bond any money. Are we willing to pay 1.3? Are we, I mean, but I think these are the conversations that it's time to have.
I'll say my only concern was on bonding was the bridges and culverts, because like I said, when I get calls and I'm throwing up authorizing barricades instead of closed county roads, I get a little concerned, so
Yeah.
that was my only thing was. And I know if we don't get the one that just got closed fixed before September, the grief we're gonna catch over that, because that's the road that goes to the Farmers Pike Festival. So, yeah.
I think I can do the next one in 5 minutes because it's more, it's just,
Not
as
as much
commissioners,
obviously.
we want the council to know it's our intent to try to reopen the youth detention center if it's financially, if it makes sense. And right now, Steve has been working on getting quotes and Jeff is working on getting IT quotes. And then I think that it would be a good idea to, let Jason help us with the planning for the funding with opioid, whatever we do. So that was just my kind of, just to make sure the council knew that that's what the commissioners were doing.
Why did it shut down and why do you want to reopen it? Just
It shut-
pretend I'm ignorant,
It
please.
shut down because the state.
Are you
made
talking
the
originally?
guidelines- Originally, it shut down because the state guidelines for it to remain open were so stringent and cost ineffective for us to put money in to keep it open. So it closed. Then True Harbor moved into it. Actually, something else was there before then, I think. But anyway.
Yeah, there was.
True Harbor moved in.
Yep.
Well, this is an ongoing problem statewide of where to put youth. And the state decided maybe we should relax our guidelines a little so that we can allow some other facilities to take up, because people were getting away from it because it was cost prohibitive for everybody else to try to get in, and where you're gonna go, and you're taking kids all over the state now. So if you had a child that was in trouble, you may have to take them to Vincennes.
Hmm.
So every time you want to see your child, you gotta go to Vincennes. What happened was, we're spending $200,000 a year housing juveniles in other counties. Yes, out of your tax dollars. So in order to facilitate, we had several counties when we were talking about doing this and had the state come out and look at the facility. And they said that it wasn't going to be as horrible to reopen as we had thought. Still going to be costly, but it's not going to be as horrible. That's what we're being told. So my understanding, and everybody jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they open it up, we're gonna hire a company to actually manage, operate and run it. Our kids would have to be here, or wouldn't have to be, if they will be. So now you've got the cost we're spending housing in other places is dramatically reduced. If they pay us a lease for the building, then that revenue comes to us, which pretty much takes care of the cost that we were paying for the beds for them to be there, in my opinion. And if we actually get it to where we make a little money, put it into a non-reverting to do any building maintenance that comes up as we go, that we don't negotiate for them to be able to do. And this way, we had at least 9 other counties that had expressed interest
Okay.
in wanting to either help pay for renovations to the building and house their kids here too.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at now. I know one of the counties
Makes sense. Okay.
Hancock County was one of them, and they had offered quite a large sum of money to help offset some of our cost.
Okay.
So, and we didn't get dollar amounts from a lot of the other counties, but it wasn't as big as what Hancock had offered. But
So just a little background, Scott, so you know, and like Steve said, a lot of facilities have closed across the state. There are many nights that Susan Lightfoot gets a phone call that needs to house a secure detention or emergency detention, and they can't find anywhere to house them.
you wind up
so
general
in safe,
population
yeah,
of the
in
general
safe
population.
housing or Pendleton has a safe keepers program at the juvenile prison. So it's, or they're in Vincennes or other
Gotcha.
places that are just
Okay.
very far away.
So it makes sense, something we need to do.
Yes, yes.
I don't think I wouldn't expect our operating expenses to decrease. We might disagree. I think that I would be really surprised if they decrease, but it's a need because we can't find beds. And if we can do it financially so that it's break even, that would be great. And they're also going to receive better care.
Okay.
from what I'm
But we
hearing.
don't have numbers yet on what it'll take to
I feel
reopen.
like it's very preliminary.
Steve, could I assume that of those 9 other counties, without having to go specifically over a list, they would be similar to the ones that used to use the detention center
think
in
so.
past years?
Yes, yes. And we've even had as far as, I think it was Knox County, they closed theirs and they expressed interest, but it was a lot of it's a transportation thing, but whether it's practical for them to bring them up here.
And we won't have to pay for transportation. The
Yes.
company provides transportation,
which
So you
makes
think
us-
it'll take $1 million
which,
to turn
which
it back
takes
up?
away,
I think it easily could by the
Okay.
time
could.
there's, because
Mhm.
of all the
Have you ever
IT,
been in it?
the intercoms, the locks.
Be worth a field trip. My biggest concern or question is kind of what you said, and then you kind of alluded to a little differently, is what's it going to come back to the budget, the general fund budget? This, I totally get. If we bonded for this, I think it's a reasonable thought pattern to bond for this. But what's it going to impact the general budget? Is the $200,000 that's currently comes out of the general fund going to be all that's going to be asked for? Or are we going to be asked for multiples of that?
Right now,
And that's the big question that I will have as a council member, and I'm assuming most of my counterparts will too.
We're hoping, and think this one Susan can agree with me on, we're hoping that nothing else comes out of the county. We're hoping that the lease that we
yeah.
design, that basically they're going to assume everything. And we may have to do some building upkeep because it still is our building. But we're hoping that if the lease is structured correctly, that we will get a percentage of what their revenue is to put back. That if there is a roof repair or whatever, that money can come out of there so it doesn't impact the general budget. That's my thought process, that hopefully we can do it that
Well,
way.
just so you catch up a little bit more, part of the concern with True Harbor was we
was a
were
bad lease.
responsible for all of
It's
the
a bad
maintenance
lease.
and the
Well,
lease
It was a
was
bad lease.
10,000 they did.
Yeah.
the first 10,000,
10,000.
but the
Okay.
hundreds of thousands we
Yes.
Now,
spent
I-
afterwards were on us.
I
And they
will
paid us
say-
what,
$24,000.
$2,000 a month.
A year, that was what we got.
Mhm.
2,000 a month.
I will
And we
say that
spent-
they did put
But
more
that
money in the
wasn't the
building
deal.
than
It
the
was
ten
not. We
thousand.
spent 10 times that in maintenance or more.
that deal?
I did
No.
not. That was
So
a
it's all
commissioner's
about the lease
position.
terms, what Steve
Mhm.
is saying.
And
it's-
so
lease terms are very
that's
important.
why I'm saying what I'm saying, because it has to be
Oh,
negotiated
yeah.
properly, because we can't open a building to help all of our surrounding counties and then foot the bill for all
No,
the
and
maintenance
that
of
is, that
this.
is
I don't know how many
absolutely,
50,000 square feet or whatever that building is. We can't foot the bill or the utilities or all of those things
Yeah,
back on
Utilities
us.
now
that-
with it being empty are costing us a fortune.
I know they are. It's, well, the roof, I mean, the roof was a questionable thing. That was
Right now.
insane amount of money, hundreds of thousands.
If we
of dollars.
spend $1 million on the YOC and 250 on servers, that adds up to exactly $5 million.
If you do the bridges, you're
If you
saying.
did everything else we talked about, yeah,
Right.
on your papers.
Because trust me, we could
Just
do
like
10
that, right.
10 million just in
Yeah.
bridges and culverts. Because, I had that conversation with, Joe.
I don't think we have that much borrowing
He
power.
goes 10 million, he goes 10 million, probably wouldn't cover everything.
again,
but
it comes
would
back to
make
what
a
Jason
huge
said, priority
difference.
budgeting.
Because we
I've-
left things that, we haven't had the funding to do the things we needed to do for years. And it's just been, there's a lot of things that's been let go. that
Yep.
We're playing catch up.
But most of the highway is through all the 3 or 4 highway taxes and road and street. And as you said earlier, I've been fighting for cumulative bridge for the last 6 budget sessions, but it affects other departments. We just don't get enough from the state through what they have as far as funding. And I suspect what we've been getting on community crossings next year will be in half of what it has been,
We're really
given the
hurting.
current proposals that's not been set yet. But Susan, I just mentioned you because we got the spreadsheet and the thing. I think Debbie's got the information. On number 4, it says utilize opioid funds and obtaining current balances. And she said that is,
Now, remember, your
we got restricted and unrestricted.
restricted is what we've spent money out of. So there is money out, that's what's in there, but there's money allocated to come out of
Okay.
there.
So about unrestricted, about 500,000 currently. And restricted is over 900,000, but there's some commitments, I think 100 or 2,000, if I remember right, commitments. So both of them about $1 million total of restricted and ARP is about 4 million, but most of that has been devoted to the buildings. So it's mostly spoken for.
All of it had to be at this point.
It's all, other than whatever somebody hasn't spent of theirs that they were. was allocated.
Well, I still have a question. 'Cause my thought in the last ARP meeting we had that the county buildings was these 3, but now there's talk also ARP money could possibly be used for reopening the YOC, which
It cannot.
It depends. Joel Harvey says the way it's written, that wasn't put in there. So it's,
so it's the 3 buildings.
When the council passed that, I think we were very restrictive on the go bond and
I thought it was these 3
He's
buildings.
talking art money.
oh, the art money, but I think it was still pretty restrictive.
So
on-
because at the end of 2024, everything had to be under contract. The only thing that we had under contract was with DLZ in these buildings. Am I correct, Debbie? So everything had to be, sorry about that. Everything had to be put under these 3 buildings.
We signed a contract with them to do these buildings. So all of our art money is for these buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So are you paying bills out of art money first and not the go bond money?
Yes.
So if.
Because we have to have it spent.
Right. So when we get to the point where the project is done and we're sure that it will be great and there won't be a lot of overages from the 5.2 million, there will be money left in the go bond.
Yeah. And then you'll have
Okay.
to go back to
extra items that we wanted.
No, we
You'll
have to have it
reopen- You'll
redone.
have to go back and
Mhm.
reopen
That's
that.
what I wondered.
Yep,
To have them
Allocate
reallocate
it.
To reallocate
Mhm.
that money, you'll have to submit another plan.
yes.
Yeah, the go bond
Okay.
was very
It was very
restrictive that we
specific.
passed when, back in 22. So it had a list of
We
items.
had 4 million in ARP that was allocated to the project.
3,929,716.
Okay,
4
so if
million.
we call it 4, then we're going to have $300,000 left in that if the project goes great. There'll be $300,000
Well,
left to.
You're gonna look at a 10% overage, right? Isn't that what
Mhm.
you say on project, 10%? So
Right. But there will be, there will be money left over that will have to be, that's right.
Microphone, Steve.
It went out.
Your tape failed you.
Yeah, my tape failed. I have to spend art money in your tape.
Buy the upgraded kind this time. Go on the Amazon.
Right there.
Yeah. But there was a lot of things that we didn't think we had the money for it,
Mhm.
that we figured the bond money, because we were trying to get rid of the art funds first because we knew we were under deadline. So we were holding back with the bond money to finish the things that were under there that we may not be able to do. So the bond money would still come into play. So, because we were looking at what, $11 million to do
Yep.
everything on DLZ's thing, and we only had between 8 and 9 million. So the money was all going to be used anyway.
Okay. And if we used it on the courthouse, we wouldn't, the go bond was not just for the courthouse, right?
It's for the Courthouse Justice Center Masonic Building.
So
Yes.
what's left, if we went back for a phase 2 and did extra additional work, we would not have to go have it renegotiated then. Is that right?
if you use it on out
If we
there.
No,
or
I-
here?
A
You'd
phase
have to come
2
back
and-
to the council to get approval from the council, right? to
No,
change
if you
it.
would
did a
have to go
phase 2
back to-
here,
You would have to go to Baker Tilly and rewrite.
the
Even if
bond.
You
we
want to do
did-
that, you would have to go back to Baker Tilly to rewrite that,
Uh-huh.
to get approval.
Even if
spend
we
that money.
spent it on the same 3 buildings.
No.
It's
No.
not
I
phase
thought you
two.
were talking about
No,
going
no.
out
No,
there.
I was just
No.
saying if we did a phase 2 and we put it back
Yeah,
into. the
no,
same
here you wouldn't have to
buildings,
do anything
I
because
don't-
it was,
Yeah, you wouldn't even
No,
have to go back to
no,
council.
no,
not
you
at
wouldn't
all.
even have to go back to council
Okay.
because it's all, it,
Okay.
it was put in for these buildings. So
Right.
no.
It's
No,
like
but to do it
all
out there,
day.
then no, you
Because
couldn't.
we were gonna originally start with the bond money, but the time frame,
Mhm.
it was gonna put us at our
Right.
deadline, and we didn't want to have to
Potentially,
give the
yep.
art money
Okay.
back.
That makes
So
sense.
we wanted to spend the art money first to get it out of the way before. Then we come up to the last minute and have a, oh crap moment, and so this way it's spent. So that was kind of the thought process, was to try to get that allocated, get it done, because it was under contract, get it out of the way, and then use bond money after that to finish up what that
Is
didn't
there
cover.
any time frame on the go bond? Okay.
Hopefully we'll be done.
Yeah.
So that was kind of.
But
the
it,
thought.
does it have to be spent by then? Has to, because I thought they kind of extended it. There's some, yeah, there is some avenues, but you really should get it spent by then. So,
When you guys have dollar figure associated with the YOC needs
Yeah.
by our discussion in April that we could potentially get.
I would like to hope so. I mean, I haven't seen any of the final numbers from Abraxas, which is the entity that's going to operate. And we were wanting them to narrow down what that was going to cost per bed. So we had an idea of what the operational was going to be per person we had out there. And we're waiting on some of that. We're waiting on the IT stuff
Mhm.
that we need to have as far as cameras, because there's a whole thing with what's outdated, what's not, what can be used as far as opening doors, closing doors, those kind of things, alarms, cameras, monitors, those kind of stuff.
And even what's working, if he doesn't think he can get replacement parts in the
Yes.
future.
So
Yeah.
we're looking at that. I've got mechanicals as far as hot water heaters, chillers, those kind of things that we're looking at.
A lot going on. I just.
Kitchen equipment.
Yeah. if we were
well, that
gonna-
building was
if
built
we're gonna
80s,
try to
Yeah,
discuss
I think
and
so.
figure out whether we're
back in
gonna
the
buy
80s.
Mm.
Yeah.
We need to have all the details by certain.
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
I mean, I was kind of
I think that's a
hoping,
good target.
I was hoping we wouldn't have to bond for the YOC. I was hoping that we had enough money between opioid money and the money that the other counties were talking about giving it to us, that we might be able to cover 90% of that. Whether that happens or not, I'm not sure now. But that was, the original plan was to make this as less painful as possible without having to borrow money. So I hate borrowing money. So
And I think Jeff had a Zoom meeting yesterday with
I think he did.
SAS to go
Or he
over,
was supposed to,
yeah,
yesterday or Monday.
yesterday.
Okay, anybody?
No, it
have
was
any-
Monday. Sorry.
Anybody have anything else?
Good job staying awake, everybody. Staying awake. I mean,
Stop,
everybody
we
was,
worked it out.
yeah, it was busy.
There you
Thanks
go.
for organizing, Chad. That was
Yes.
really helpful, so.
Good. I mean, I know it
Appreciate
is a long day, a lot of information. We have absolutely no decisions to come out of it, but a lot more questions than answers. I think it was good. It was productive. I think we had some hard conversations. We've said some things that we haven't said out loud in the past that we need to say out loud because it's going to hit us hard. This year's going to be rough. Next year's going to suck, and hold on to your hats when Deb leaves us in 27. So we're all in trouble. But we will survive, and we've got to just continue to work hard to do the absolute best we can for everybody in this county with the least negative impact. We just have to look at that with everything. Let's do it. Do it. Come on.